Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of Reviewing Adam Curtis. It is the what is it, like the 78th time? And well, I don't know if you noticed recently, Simon, I've been doing a little bit of material on what they call personal growth, spiritual and personal growth. And as part of that, I have been trying to develop my water element, my pastoral care, my emotional support for other people. And in light of that, I can't help but notice that in recent weeks, you've been suffering, haven't you? You've been suffering for the fact that we are stuck in an internal twilight zone that can't get you out of my head. And
that was my fire element going off a bit there.
Oh, it was different. It was a gentle bell last week. Bloody hell.
Yeah, I've really been enjoying these videos actually, and I've had friends who I've sent them to have also gained much value out of them. I say that in all seriousness. Well, I've even sent them to my mother.
I tell you what's a little bit different, because I was, it's when you make something that's outside of your usual. Especially when you have over 100,000 subs, there's always a part of you that's a little bit trepidatious about how the hell is this going to be taken. But I've been quite overwhelmed, Simon, by the amount of positivity in the comments, especially given, I open up a couple of vulnerable things in there, and I talk about a few touchy areas for people, including things like, no FAP and various other things, addictions and so on. So I thought, well, you're risking touching a few raw nerves and things like that. But in general, people have been incredibly supportive. I've been kind of overwhelmed by it. So
I think they're brilliant. I mean, I'll be absolutely clear about that. I think they're great. And I know I always say this, but it will actually tie into the end of this episode today in a surprising way, in terms of similar theme that you have been exploring.
I just remember roughly a year ago noticing that some people in the comments and in the chat would say, like, this is the best thing on YouTube, and they seem to mean it as well. It's like quite happy about that. It's nice.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that I talk about in those recent videos, Simon, is making a commitment, right? To, people moan about the practice of journaling, for example. But the reason that you journal is because you're making a firmer commitment. You're telling your brain, this is more than just something I've agreed to. I'm literally committing to it. And when I promised in the title of this stream that we're finally going to finish Can't Get You Out of My Head, I thought, what is a big enough commitment to myself, to the audience, and to Simon, more importantly, to make sure that we finish? And to this end, I have busted out of 3-year storage a vintage 2021, 2022 H. Upmann Sir Winston. And I thought that's an interesting tie-in to the show because Sir Winston has been such a villain on the history of Deepest Lore, hasn't he? On the history of Adam Curtis. But arguably the best thing about him, really, was the fact that he had this love with cigars. Although I will say, and maybe Panama Hat will back me up here, even the way Winston Churchill is into cigars is a little bit annoying and disappointing. Because he used to like really bite and chew the ends off them, and then dip them in his drink, and just literally just almost like treat it like chewing gum. So he even liked cigars in a kind of slightly pig-like manner. So
Yeah, it's also the case that he used to sometimes not bother to light them. He would just chew on them. You know, which may explain to some extent why he was always bankrupt. But yeah, and he used to he invented something called a belly bander, which was a sort of strip of heat-resistant paper that his wife would tie under the top of the cigar, for the reason being that he was always falling asleep in armchairs with a lit cigar in his mouth and burning holes in his clothes and getting ash everywhere. So yeah, strange.
Now, historically, Churchill did not actually smoke this cigar, the Upmann Sir Winston. His favorite brand was Romeo and Julieta, and there was this size. This is a pretty big 47 ring gauge by 7 inches. It was a 7-inch cigar. It's 47, but Churchill's impact on the cigar world was became so iconic that they renamed this Vitola to the Sir Winston forevermore. And that cigar, the Romeo and Julieta Sir Winston, is still sold now. And I think then all the other lines, including the Upmann, brought out their own version of the Sir Winston. So this is not actually the cigar Churchill would have smoked. He would have smoked the Romeo and Julieta.
That's correct.
Yeah, is that right? Yeah.
I also read that he mostly smoked cigarettes, and like cigars were for occasions and for photos as well. But most of the day he would be smoking cigarettes or normal sized cigars like these photos.
I think he was pretty into cigars.
He smoked 10 of these a day, right? And this is probably one of the more expensive cigars on the market. So to smoke 10 of them a day is, pretty kind of exuberant, kind of luxurious living.
Well,
his life, he was also drinking like whiskey all day, plus brandy and champagne most days of his life, apparently. Plus cigarettes as well.
A little interesting factoid is when Gary Oldman did the film The Darkest Hour, he smoked around 400 cigars while he was playing the role.
Wow.
Apparently the cost was estimated at between $20,000 and $30,000.
You're going to say something, Hap?
Well, I thought I'd smoked all my cigars because I've been going out quite a lot this past week, but your cigar talk so ignited a craving for the rich taste of tobacco that I rummaged around in my satchel and found a Davidoff Puro Dominicano, which I will now enjoy as we fail to watch Adam Curtis.
The thing I want to ask you, AA, is have you been practicing your incisor technique, that the walk and talk cigar, or just the walk and smoke?
No, I can't. I've never been able to do that. And they don't recommend walking with a cigar because you're meant to savor it. You're meant to it's meant to help you slow down. So
you need to sort of have it in your mouth while you're ostentatiously handling a Thompson submachine gun or something like that.
I don't really understand that American practice of walking around with one in your mouth all the time.
Fair enough.
But let us. Before we get going here, there's a couple of things I want to talk about. One, my Game of the Year series on Academic Agent Gaming. I need to keep on plugging it until, at the very least, that gaming channel gets monetized. It should definitely get monetized now. I think about 40,000 people have watched it so far. All in. I mean, it's been getting like decent views. But the reason I'm mentioning it today not only is to get you over there, but the last year that I covered, the one that came out today, was 1991. And I didn't really know this going into it, but the year 1991 may just be the best single year in video gaming history. And I'll be interested, if I ever get to 2026, as to whether any other year will even get close. And I know Horace watched it before we came on air, and I was a little bit worried. I'm not going to give away what my pick is, but I couldn't quite believe the number of amazing all-time games that weren't number one in that year. to the point where ones that would have been number one in any other year ended up being honorable mentions for 91. So that's something I don't like. Is that a thing that people talk about? 1991 is the best year of all time for games? I don't think so, but it actually is. It's one of those things I kind of stumbled on. So, yeah.
I never thought of games by year, but when I remember back to that time, it was encrusted with good games. Yeah, all the time it seemed like new, big, good games were coming out.
Yeah, I mean, I will say I've recorded a few of them. Like 92 and 93 are in the bag already. And I talk 92 video is almost an hour long as well. So clearly, it's hitting like a sweet spot for my youth. Simon, of course, 1992 was already about 40 years old, wasn't you, Simon?
Yeah, pretty much 58. I think I was at that point. But I can only really wait for 1993 to see if Shadow President, the only game that I remember from that era that I played, will get a mention. The one was infamously buggy that when I played it with a friend and immediately bombed Russia and my popularity score went to 800%, and he cried because he thought there was a bug with the game, but I kept playing, and then I bombed China. And
I did play Shadow President, but I haven't actually picked it, Simon.
That's fine.
I have picked lesser known games that you may like, though, such as Hidden Agenda from 1988, where you play as a South American dictator and have to kind of manage all the different factions and appease different people, and also manage like the different personalities in your cabinet. And also, possibly even more up your street, is a game called Floor 13, where you literally play as a kind of Lord Mandelson type character, or you play as like Sir Urquhart, or
sorry, just clarify. You mean Lord Mandelson as he was maybe 25 years ago?
As he would have been in 1992. You play as a behind the scenes fixer, the fixer for the Prime Minister, and like your job entails bullying people and putting dark stories in the press and trying to trying to make sure that the Prime Minister stays in office and all sorts of things. I just think that is a game that doesn't really get talked about enough. But if you liked Shadow President, you probably like those two games.
I think I can relate to those sorts of, like you say, having a cabinet of people working for you, or different, you having Shadow President, your diplomats and your warriors and all of these people sort of giving you different bits of advice, and then you can choose and strategize on that basis. I mean, I played shooters later, in the 2000s, but I kind of like those old kinds of games with sort of console and sort of an interface where you're looking at the whole world and thinking how to rule it.
One last thing I want to get into before we hit Curtis, right? And we are going to get to Curtis sooner than normal today. Is that I came across this little video clip on Twitter, and for some reason I got the overwhelming sense that Panama Hat was born to play this role. Let me just watch this a second.
Strawberries. I like strawberries. They're so... Now, let me see if I've got enough to share with Louise and Alan. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, there are enough. Oh, good, I can't wait. Louise!
Did you call, Humphrey?
Yes, I do. Do you know where Alan is?
Yes, he's in the kitchen. Do you want him?
Yes, please.
Alan! Oh, Humphrey, are those strawberries?
Yes, they are. And I'm going to share them.
Oh, that's a nice thought.
Hey, did somebody mention strawberries?
Yes, Humphrey did.
You see, I have this dish of strawberries, and I'm going to share them with you both.
Oh, thank you very much. That's very kind of you.
Yes, I know, it is. But I mustn't be greedy, must I?
I don't know why, but there's a kind of Panama Hat quality to this character.
I mean, I was expecting it would be one of these usual things where it's sort of like they have to teach him a lesson about why he shouldn't eat them all, and he has to share them. But from the very start, he announces he's going to share them with all his friends, and I love how drawn out it is.
Someone at this very moment is working on an AI porno version of this, by the way. I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's going to happen.
I mean, I don't even know what sort of creature that is or is meant to be. Is he like a caterpillar or something? Or?
He's a cushion. No. He's Humphrey Cushion. He's actually a sort of anthropomorphic cushion called Humphrey Cushion, and this is a program called Hickory House from the 70s. I was saying to Panama before we came on, I don't actually remember it, although when I saw the clip originally, that stirred in some memory that I would have seen it, but I've just forgotten it. But it's It's so odd. Incidentally, there's a kind of a dark version there's a comedian called Sean Renard who has a character called Quentin Smyers, and he's a kind of ultimate distillation parody of all the kind of kids' TV kind of sensibility of the 70s, but done in a very dark way. And he's got a character called Comfrey that he works with, but it is really quite dark. But he sort of wears like a mustard coloured, polo neck sweater and walks around in a pair of white underpants, and has a sort of geography teacher haircut. He's kind of like a sort of dark parody of everything about sort of men in the 70s and slightly unsettling children's television. So I sort of recommend him, but beware.
How did you come across this, AA?
Well, my entire For You feed on Twitter is just full of nostalgia from this is somebody's nostalgia. And I just thought, I was like, oh, that's unusual. I don't remember this. Because I don't think this isn't one of those ones that was repeated regularly, like in the 80s when I was a kid. So it's kind of like forgotten to time.
It's not been released, I think, on DVD or anything like that.
No, because I was trying to look it up, and it seems very obscure. There's very few details out there about it.
Hickory is a type of wood, right?
Yeah.
Yes. In fact, the only context that you ever hear about hickory is when it's like an American, like hickory smoked. Hickory
smoked food, yeah.
So other than the fact that I have no arms and legs and I look like that, what is it that put you in mind of me?
Well, he's not in a rush. He's kind of well spoken.
Strawberries.
Strawberries. Yeah.
And there's something. I mean, even the little chat that you were having as I was fumbling about trying to get ready.
Yeah.
With Simon, there is this kind of
lugubrious
air that you've got. I'm going to this thing. I forgot I even had a ticket.
H. Upton cigar, marvelous. Wonderful.
Well, next time we meet, I'll share some strawberries with you, and we'll.
Excellent. Okay.
I've got to ask, you may have seen my DM earlier. Did you not hear Dogface Gremlin this morning was talking about kayfabe? He was on a kayfabe roll.
Yeah. Well, yeah. That's maybe I'll have to cover that in next week's office hours. Maybe I'll have to. Maybe the influence of my dark influence is finally.
I think it has. He'd never heard of it. Yeah, interesting.
I don't expect the Dogface Gremlin was a wrestling fan. Doesn't seem like he would have been.
No.
Okay. Shall we? I'll remind people, pick up courses at the Academic Agency, of course. Trivium and any other great courses available. Where can people find you guys?
At Simon__Roberts on Twitter.
EternalHorus.substack.com.
At Lowlifehat on Twitter.
Are you really a low life, or are you being a bit unfair on yourself?
I'm being unfair on myself. It was. I don't remember why I chose that as the new account.
Call yourself something like higher.
You can't call yourself High Hat because that's like a sort of.
What was that Josh Wink song? Higher states of consciousness.
Higher state of consciousness.
higher states of consciousness hat. Freed from desire hat. I don't know.
I think it's charming deprecation in a bohemian way.
Does everybody know higher state of consciousness? It's like the one time, I don't know, sort of acid trance got into the charts.
Yeah, it didn't just get into the charts. It got into the charts every single year for about a decade.
Oh, right.
It was like every single, like now 96 and new hits 96 and now 32. Every single one of them had a slightly different version of Josh Wink higher states of consciousness on it. There was one in 95, there was one in 98. So, I don't know if anybody, I mean, I was a little bit too young to go to clubs and things at that time. Was it played a lot? Do people actually
I was too young as well. Yeah. I'm sure it was. I've heard it at festivals and stuff. Yeah.
The only club I went to was in Perth in Australia when I was in the early 90s. It was a club called what's it called? The Asylum
Alley.
Or something like that. We used to go on a Friday night, and about 10:30 on a Friday night, they'd always play "How Soon Is Now" by the Smiths. It was always regular. regular floor filler. Yeah, it was some sort of, I don't know, maybe it was like, I don't think they had to drink up or anything and leave. I think it was just a regular thing. You could always rely on it being played at that moment.
But did the club shut? Because that should be like when people are getting a bit sick of being out, and want to go home.
Yeah. No, I don't think it did. I don't think they had the same licensing laws in Australia as they did in England. So I don't think you had to.
It's a great song. Obviously, the lyrics are about not going out or not enjoying going out.
Yeah.
I will just before we put on Curto hat, I will have to report the Upman Churchill has been spectacular so far. It's a darker shade of shortbread than the usual Upman. A little bit of bitter chocolate in there, a little bit of this darker notes, and possibly you get that with the bigger cigar a lot of the time. But there's a bit of leather and earth in the background, which you don't usually expect from an Upman. But it's like a dark. It's like if you took a shortbread and dunked it in a coffee or something like that, that kind of dark, slightly darker shortbread taste. That's what I would say. So started off strongly, but there's a lot more to go.
And of course, you'd kept it aged in your humidor, hadn't you, which will enrich the flavor.
Yeah, so this has got about 3 or 4 years on it. And don't forget, when I get them, they've usually got about a year on them already. From so.
How long before you start tasting things in cigars? I'm sorry to roll over you, Panama. How long before you start tasting things? I've only ever had 3 cigars in my life. When do you start picking up?
If you're me, you can pick it up fairly quickly. If you're Panama Hat, you only ever taste tobacco. Is that true?
What? I don't.
I mean, do you pick up the different flavors in the?
Depends on the cigar. I mean, to be honest, most cigars, even relatively expensive ones, they're not. They haven't quite got the palate of, say, expensive wine where you can get loads and loads of different little things all the time. I mean, you're more of a kind of choosy picker with yours, and you tend to keep them slightly better. But no, I mean, oddly enough, one of my favorite sort of pleasure smokes would be the very, very cheap J. Cortez Honduran ones, because they have a very, very strong taste of a slightly sort of citrusy tang under them, which is quite unusual for such a cheap cigar. But for example, this one now doesn't have very much flavor, even in its first third. It's more just a lovely, rich, deep tobacco as opposed to something with notes in it. But it really depends. I mean, to be honest, even if it hasn't got sort of underlying flavors, I just enjoy smoking, really. Pleasurable.
Well, this is developed butter underneath, a little slight oiliness, a bit of vanilla perhaps, as we've been talking. So I'll keep you updated as we carry on. But we're going to be watching a lot of Curto today.
We
maybe
should
a hint of spice and cinnamon, maybe a bit of cinnamon as well. Go on. Yeah.
We should restart Cigar Stream, but we just sit and smoke cigars and discuss the cigars.
That's what it was meant to be originally. It was actually meant to originally be that, and I just somehow it ended up being what it became. So yeah. Okay. And I will. Last thing I'll say is there has been an attempt by the evil forces of the universe to try to drag me out of my Zen-like state back into battle. And tomorrow I've got a video addressing the critics of video, the female. Basically, it was almost like only like a week or so of me doing this gaming stuff and trying to step back from politics a little bit. All of these female influencers started attacking video games and saying men who play video games are really unattractive and give us the ick and all of this sort of stuff. And I felt myself almost in like a Gamer's Gate sort of way being dragged back in. So I've made a video doing my very best to address all of that in the most adult-like manner possible to almost kind of deflect back the negative energy back at Megan Murphy and various other people, and to be like, try to give a considered response to why is it these women are attacking video games, and why is it that I feel the need to defend
your anger, her agenda.
So I look forward to that one. Go on, Horace. Yeah.
Were you around in Gamergate 1, the original Gamergate?
I was watching, but I was not creating.
Right, same here. This, I first heard of Sargon a few months before that, and the other guy, the American aristocrat, before, like a few months before. So I was sort of already following their channels when that blew up. But do you remember that Gamergate 3 started on your channel on a stream when Carl Benjamin said we should write a letter to the third world and ask them not to move here? That was Gamergate 3. I can't remember what Gamergate 4 was, and then Gamergate 5 was like last year or something with like actual Gamergate happened again.
Well, an event as big as Gamergate 3 happened on my channel. I can't even remember it.
Yeah, it was like Carl was on as a guest. I think Keith Woods was on at the same time. So it's like good sort of 5 years ago, 6 years ago, or something. And I was in the chat, and yeah, like that was Gamergate 3, as widely agreed to be the third episode. Gamergate 2 was when Carl said we need to get Trump to tweet about Gamergate. In about 2017 or something. Can't remember what Gamergate 4 was, but Gamergate 5 was an actual, like another episode of Gamergate, like last year or a year before. But you've just started Gamergate 6 by.
Well, I haven't started it. I've just been trying to mind my own business. And
I mean, but I'm proud to be at the start of this. Is the dawning of Gamergate 6, which may not be as big of a deal as Gamergate 1, but we'll see. I'm quite pleased.
Well, I've tried to do it in the form of an anti-slot video, so we'll see how that goes. But I've tried to come at it with intellectual charity and a spirit of kind of growing together. Let's see how that goes. Because, but I will say it's a topic that gets people extremely angry on both sides for some reason, and I just don't really understand the vitriol from anybody. But anyway, yeah, look forward to that tomorrow morning. Okay, shall we begin?
Here we go.
In the West, the corruption and the inequalities also continued to grow. The politicians seemed unable to do anything about it. But the technology systems were mutating, morphing into ever more extreme forms. And out of that was going to come a completely new kind of management and control in the modern world.
Sorry to pause it already, but I feel like he's been saying this for about 80 hours now.
Well, it is probably the longest series he's done up to this point. I mean, he's taken lots of different threads and in order to tell this particular story, which we'll arrive at about what he thinks is the new current system of management. Because for previous series, as we've discussed, he's looked at all the attempts to, as he says, manage the world by technical means, whether it was by psychiatry or whether it was by game theory or the free market. And the latest iteration, if you like, of the kind of top-down management as it takes a certain kind of distributed form is what we're realizing actually in this moment about this level of hysteria that we're living under, the sort of endless news cycle, the ups and downs. And he will crystallize that at the end of the episode, really.
Unlike in China, it wouldn't try and bury people's emotions and feelings. It would work by doing the very opposite, pushing and exaggerating those emotions to a pitch of continual hysteria and suspicion that would create a frozen world, paralyzed by the distrust of everyone and everything.
I'm sorry to pause it again, but in a way, Simon, as we age and become more mature and so on,
sedate, yes,
I increasingly see it as the role of some of us to dial the heat back down again. To try to just cut, like if they're always trying to get the dial up to 11, we're always trying to turn it back down again, because the sides are fake, for one. This is a control mechanism, and so a lot of stuff that we've done in the past few years have been trying to get people to see that there's no point. Like imagine you get yourself involved in a Tommy March or something like this, and then you're out on the street and now you're fighting with a group of Muslims or something like that, or fighting with Antifa or something. What's the point of any of that? What's the point?
Absolutely.
I mean, you're literally furthering the control grid if you behave in that way, in my opinion. So
he said himself in a podcast at the time of this was released, the thing that really shocked me about the last 4 years is that although there was great hysteria in America and in Britain over Brexit and Trump, if you actually pull back and looked at what was happening, nothing really changed in terms of the structure of power. There was great fury and hysteria and a sort of sense that there was this continual dynamic thing, but actually it was a frozen moment. And I wanted to put the films out after the election so I could turn around and say, look, it didn't really change. Maybe the hysteria was part of the new system of power that is beginning to take hold. That is beginning to hold this time in its frozen grip.
See, we have to take our hats off and just acknowledge the genius of Curtis.
Yeah.
For him to be able to see that,
ago.
That's pretty good to see it all the way back then, I would say.
Yeah.
It's taken some of us a bit longer to see it all.
He said, I decided to trace all kinds of different routes to now, 70 or 80 years ago, that at the time, things that seemed completely and utterly separate. On the one hand, you had a growing melancholy in this country about the loss of empire and a sort of emergent anger among the white working class at the same time. You couldn't explain it through just the one set of ideas. You've got to explain it by all the different things. And I haven't explained everything, but I chose to show how all the different things that flowed into that actually happened.
If there's one group who Curtis is sort of, laughing at as not getting this, as not getting that not much changed with both those seemingly epochal changes, is it the people he's most laughing at? Would it be like sort of like
middle class liberals? That's
right.
He's kind of explicit about it in some of the interviews. It's really them who were unable to come up with any new set of ideas about how to address the world, and they sort of leaned into either retreating into culture or these kinds of technocratic methods, people like Cummings and so on, or David Cameron, the Behavioral Insights Unit. And essentially, they just failed to offer a new narrative. So it was kind of really more or less down to them. They're the people he's focusing on. All the stuff about the racism in the system that he was talking about in the early episodes, he's not really... When I saw it at the time, I thought, oh, he's saying Britain is racist. What he was actually talking about was something below that level. He talked about Michael X, the sort of chap who became a sort of black radical. He was one of Peter Rackman's gangster heavies. But he said what he was interested in about what Michael de Freitas was saying was that, yes, there was a certain, racialized reaction. When he came to Britain, he was all kind of trained in the ways of empire, and he was disappointed that when he came to Britain, he was rejected by the system, which he, living out in the Caribbean, saw as the motherland, that he would come back and he'd be accepted. And he was disappointed by that. But below that, he said there was a deeper level at which he could see there was a deep brokenness and melancholy in the British themselves. And this had been kind of spun, if you like, by the sort of liberal middle classes into a kind of corrosive force that was now running through society. And that was really the thing that, when Michael X was sent to jail for racism, strangely, and he got out, all the kind of young liberal white radicals were all, he recognized they were all the children of the people who ran the empire. And they were kind of dressing themselves in kind of radical chic to talk about changing the world. But really it was, they were wanting to change everybody else into a sort of reflection of their kind of, they did carry this sort of internalized guilt, and they thought they could rearrange society to sort of fit around that. And that was what he sort of saw.
So say again what he was doing with his mentions of racism there, because I remember that was,
he was, as I say, Curtis was interested in what he talked about in his. He wrote a book, a sort of autobiography. It's lost to history. I can't find a copy of it, but in it he talked about a sort of deep melancholy that was within the British now. That somehow that there had been a failure of empire, and that at some level the sort of the middle tier, what do we say, the non-governing elites. The people who kind of ran the empire had this deep sense of guilt coming back, which was haunting them. And it came out in things like the Yellow Peril. It became the sort of, a projection of menace coming into us from the empire, and then them enacting social programs to kind of change everybody to sort of redress that in some way. And what Curtis is going about in these interviews, he's talking about the problem, and this is a problem, he says, for the left as well, that they don't deal with the stuff that's left in people's heads after these great social political projects, and that becomes a problem in imagining something new. which is what he's trying to head towards. So he himself is a kind of, as I've said before, he identifies himself as sort of progressive, but not really on the left, and not really on the right, but sort of libertarian as well. And he tends to change his views depending on the material he's dealing with. He says, for instance, with Power of Nightmares, he was kind of arguing from a position that understood the current neoconservatism. He was talking about how two forces, the neocons and the fundamental Islamists, were both kind of trapped with visions of a sort of reactionary past, and ended up contesting with each other on the world stage and feeding each other's power by each other's attempts to kind of bring back a sort of if you like, a more conservative vision of the world. Sayyid Qutb, looking at America and seeing it as degenerate and soulless, and the neocons, essentially feeling that they had to go to the third world and bring democracy as revolutionaries. And this is what this is his method.
I suggest telling the audience about that lecture that you on Curtis that you sent me yesterday.
Yeah,
because I listened to that last night, and the one bit, I agreed with a lot of it, and the one bit that I agreed with most was just that Curtis's way of communication is so idiosyncratic that you can think 10 different interpretations of most of what he says, right? Like all the like, I keep hearing different perspectives, like all different from each other, and like loads of people. Obviously, well, we can't all be understanding him. I mean, I know that and it's not because it's like above our understanding. It's because it's so unusual, such a strange way of going about things. It's also what makes him so interesting, as I think that guy said as well.
That's it. He said with this series, he put together, there's lots of juxtaposition. People go, oh, why is he putting that image there? I don't understand. What does that mean? He talked in one of the interviews about there's a sort of spinning plates of different narratives all going as different threads. And there's a lot of digression and fragments, sort of random exposures, disorientation, clashing genres. And he says what he's trying to do is he's trying to think about how people experience the world now, like being inured to using the internet. He says you're always jumping around, and it's sort of a new modern kind of realism. It's how people experience the world. In the past, he talked about how he wanted to create series that were like the big sprawling Russian novels of the 19th century, where, you had a sort of, omniscient and, omnitemporal and omnispatial kind of complexity, all these different layers and levels that the books were working on. And he says now in the internet age, we go online, we start researching something, then we digress, then something random comes in, and then we go back on track, and then we go on another digression. And he was trying to capture, if you like, the form of modern experience and emotion by stylistically using that as the mechanism and technique of his documentary. So yes, he is not, one important thing to note is he's not talking about history, he's talking about power with a capital P, and where he's trying to locate where has power gone.
But in a very artistic way, because
using techniques from the art scene. He's very conscious about that. Yeah, absolutely. So I'll put the lecture up that Horace mentions. It's an academic at the University of Singapore called Luke O'Sullivan, and he sort of does an overview of Curtis's series and talks about the sort of approaches he's taking. But yeah, I think this is why it's valuable. It's if you, as I say, you look beyond this, whatever your sense of Curtis's politics is. As a journalist, which is what he mainly sees himself as, he says, it's not my job to give you answers. I'm going to outline the options of the way I think the world is heading. He's got this one view that it either heads to a Chinese-style system where, what you think in your head doesn't matter. They just simply provide a kind of sort of technocratic travelator that whisks you to where you want to be, but you have to trade off your freedoms. Or in the West, where it's a kind of pumped up, amplified hysteria that we're currently living in, which, again, going back to what AA's video was about, is I think this is why there is a moment for withdrawal, actually. And he will say that. I'll come back at the end of the episode, but he talks about, actually, it is about perhaps we just need to stop, pull back, and come out of this mode of hysteria, which we'll probably look back on as kind of a mad time. This level of raised tension that's constant in the news cycle, and yet nothing actually changes. And he is driving towards this option of reimagining, the world, and actually going, no, this stuff doesn't affect us. This stuff, we have to pull out of it. It is the slop cycle. It is nonsense. Withdraw from it.
Or an alternative to withdrawal is this: that will just be forced to stop the current hysteria because of some material change, grand material change. Obviously, like I think,
some black swan event that come in. Yeah.
I think maybe with the predictable one of a massive credit contraction, maybe.
Yeah, but I have to say, in context of what we've been talking about, I mean, people might think we're being a bit fey here, talking about the sort of therapeutic modes that perhaps we need to engage in. But actually, for me, it's become increasingly real, because I've been looking at the stuff that Mark Fisher was writing about creativity back in the late 20th century and how it happened. And a lot of it was effectively because housing was cheaper. There's a lot of creative people who were effectively subsidized by welfare. But one of the points he made was that in order to make anything, you have to undergo periods of social withdrawal. If you're constantly in the news cycle, if you're constantly online, you can't make anything happen. And I've realized in my own life, actually, I need to pull back and go, actually, if I'm going to make anything or do anything interesting, I'm going to have to be less online.
Yeah.
So AA's sort of fantasy about Twitter ending sort of appeals to me in a certain way.
But also there's more. If you go back to that video on addiction, it's not just that. Think about it now. I've said this for a long time. Imagine now you're watching constant videos, let's say, of like black guys kicking white guys in the head, right? Just brutality from all around the world, or crimes that are going on, or something, all day, every day, watching that sort of footage. What are you doing to your brain? What are you doing to your you're just filling yourself full of negativity all the time. And the question is, what good can come from that? What can it do to you other than basically fill you more and more of hate or whatever else?
As Macbeth says, I have supped full of horrors.
I know someone who's almost physiologically addicted to watching those can't stop progress reels just for hours and hours and hours and hours a day. It's horrific, really. It's very sad, and I think it's probably psychologically the same as porn addiction, I would think.
Exactly. I mean, that's exactly why I advocate for the no fap, no porn. And I've been on that train for a very long time, as you guys will know, going back 6-7 years. But what are you doing? You're watching material that's going to rewire your brain in real time, all the time, and change how you relate not only to the world but to yourself. And this stuff may sound woo-woo, but it's not. It's just at some level, Simon, it is psychology. It's
absolutely,
brainwashing.
Yeah. Just knowing. I mean, like you say, as one gets older, you just kind of yourself, and you can be honest about yourself. And one of the themes of this channel has been, you may want to believe certain things about the world, but sometimes you have to accept that it just isn't that way, and you have to be a realist about the way you think things will turn out or want them to turn out. Your wish casting isn't necessarily really how life is, and you may be going to have to accept that. But once you do, it lifts a great burden, and you can actually think creatively.
Right, and in a strange way, once you accept certain things in that way, then you can make things happen that may seem like they're magic or something like that, but a lot of it comes from you have to reframe certain things and think in a different way as well. You can achieve amazing things, but there are some things that are within your control and some things that are completely there's just nothing you can do about them. Do you know what I mean? And I remember I watched this video years ago that talked about depression. Now, I've never been depressed myself, but one of the common features of people who do get depressed is that they fixate on massive problems that they have no worldwide problems that they have no hope of solving. One of the ones, for example, is climate. Is the catastrophizing around climate change is one of the examples. Well, if you spend all your time thinking about that or worrying about it, it is going to send you it's going to send you into a kind of depression cycle, because you'll feel powerless. You'll feel, and this is actually stuff that Uncle Ted talked about back in the day as well. This kind of, the surrogate activities and the fact that you can't really get involved in politics in any meaningful way, and that leaves people feeling powerless, and that leads to depression and all the rest of it. So it's like, well, you have, if you just accept some of that stuff as a fact, you can then focus on what you can change or what you can affect.
And this is why so much of the left's popular discourse is about depression. I mean, Fisher called his book, Ghosts of My Life, writings about, I think, hauntology and depression. And he had insight. He recognized the state of stuckness that culture was in was a reflection of a level of wider spread depression, in a sense, that people had, they'd gone into a condition he called depressive hedonia. It wasn't that people weren't experiencing pleasure. It was that technology had brought them infinite means of content, and, you could experience all kinds of pleasure, and people were dutifully just kind of anesthetizing themselves with drugs or digital culture or whatever. But it was done in a kind of a way of flat affect. They weren't necessarily enjoying it. It was just that it became a sort of rat chasing its tail activity. And he felt that, there was an idea that at a kind of libidinal level, the idea of your desire, which is what has been fed from the era of Bernays onwards, what you want, he thinks there was perhaps not much desire for actual change, because depression is about a massive level of avoidance of wanting to change. And maybe that is what infected us culturally. So this is why the hysteria, what's Trump going to do next? Oh, he's terrible. Oh, gosh. And all the reaction that it elicits from you, which engages and traps you in that system, becomes the problem. And it does become, as Evelyn and Scrump say, the endless conversation.
Now, before we move on, I have to tell you this, guys. As we've been talking, and as Simon and Horace were talking as well, do you remember in Scooby-Doo when Scooby-Doo and Shaggy would have one of those giant sandwiches, and then they'd love it so much they'd float up into the air, and then they'd float slowly downwards, right? This cigar is so good. I've been basically doing that this entire time. I'm basically in heaven here. This is one of the greatest cigars I have ever smoked. It's a 97, 98, easily. And the last time I had one of these, I felt that way as well. This is one of the very best Cubans. It's classy and luxury, but it's so good. It's amazing. I'm in heaven. So if I'm quiet, it's because I'm literally having a kind of cigar version of a trip, of the Shaggy and Scooby sandwich trip in cigar form. This is incredible. So
living your best life on stream.
Have you developed helicopter blades? Is that why we can hear the thrumming of an engine?
Yeah, exactly. I have literally become a helicopter.
I'm picturing you going on some sort of Native American vision quest or something.
Oh, it's just incredible. Do you remember the Alice in Wonderland where the caterpillar is on his back, kind of just puffing smoke into the sky? This is incredible. I'm glad I had it now. I need to get myself more. Trouble is with these, is they're so hard to get hold of. They're not just expensive; they're really hard to get hold of as well. Limited production, and they sell out instantly.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's carry on. Oh man, some one of those moments in life where I was experiencing pure luxury. You know what I mean? This may be what
Bastani.
Then again, a character like Andrew Tate,
okay,
right, could buy the cigar, but he wouldn't experience it, would he? He'd be showing off with it, but he wouldn't be experiencing the true journey of the Upman series.
He's doing it wrong. You're doing fully de-automated luxury cigar smoking.
Exactly.
Rolled on the size of a virgin. What is there because sometimes music can express feelings and sensations better than anything. Is there a certain song that would capture how good that cigar is? Or
it's just. I'm trying to think. It's
could be a classical piece. Could be Wagner. Could be Mozart. Could be T-Rex. The
it's like one of those. It's like one of those Led Zeppelin songs that starts fast, but then you kind of like floating down slowly. Do you know what I mean? Like kind of, one of the like the
Kashmir by Led Zeppelin.
I don't know, one of the longer tracks from Physical Graffiti or something like that. Do you know what I mean? Where you're going on a journey, you're on a trip here, and I'm suddenly like away with the D&D the D&D fantasy creatures in a Led Zepp track or something like that. It's incredible. It really is. Anyway,
Concept album stuff, not one track.
It's Beatles. Turn off your mind, relax, and float downstream.
What was that Doors song that is played at the start of that war film, and the guy is like doing the funny dance?
The end.
It's like the end.
Right. It's the end of Platoon, or is it?
Platoon? Yeah, exactly.
Apocalypse Now.
Apocalypse Now. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
Surrey. I'm still in Surrey.
Oh, it's incredible.
By now, the social media corporations had realised that intense emotions were the key to increased profits. And what were called viral content factories were growing rapidly online. Their aim was to spread memes and other material that would create what they called high arousal emotions, or activating emotions, such as lust and nostalgia and envy, or best of all, outrage. Because these were feelings that got people to pay attention longer and react more intensely, which then translated into many more clicks and shares. Then in 2000...
See, and this is why, Simon, the overcoming the anger has been the most difficult journey of all. Because the world is literally trying to gear itself towards triggering, like, you talk about trigger.
Yeah.
It's literally trying to provoke you all the time, to irritate and to provoke until you lose it.
Yeah. It's not, I think some people misinterpret what we're talking about here is, you're not being grand and you're not rising above the political, concerns that people have in an arrogant way, but you are sort of, like you've often used the phrase, taking the 10,000 foot view and seeing what is actually going on and how you're being, it is being offered to manipulate you.
Yes.
And you the thing is, for me, it's become exhausting. And this is a lot of what the cultural theorists talk about. This becomes an exhausting cycle. And it's kind of designed to do that because, as Curtis has talked about, it prevents you looking at what they've actually been doing, what the technocrats are doing, what the politicians are doing. And he talks about, I'll bring it in a little later on, but kind of a justification for why this system of hysteria has been enacted. We went past the kind of Surkoff age at the beginning of the 20th century of manipulating the political struggle as theatre, and now it's become a kind of a psychological derangement as a kind of management system. But we'll get more into it.
I just wanted to. You mentioned that. What was that lyric you mentioned a minute ago, Simon? Was it "Turn off your mind, relax, and float downstream"? It is not knowing, it is not dying, or something like that, right?
Tomorrow Never Knows, the Beatles. Yeah.
Tomorrow Never Knows. That's it. Did anybody ever hear? This is a very obscure music digression, but there's a group called Amorphous Androgynous. They used to be the Future Sound of London. I think they've gone back to that name.
Right.
They did a famous track called Papua New Guinea, which was a big hit. That's still played in places. But they went through, after doing all their good music, they went sort of embarrassingly shit and did a load of hippie stuff. But then at the end of that, they kind of got good again. And they did a track with Noel Gallagher, strangely. This was about 2012-ish. And it's called Falling Down. And it sounds like their version of Tomorrow Never Knows. I recommend it to people. And also about music. Just a minute ago, I think we had a bit of Aphex Twin from, what was it? Selected Ambient Works Part 2, which Curtis loves. That's his favourite. You can tell that's his favourite Aphex Twin. And then it just suddenly cut into something else. So I was just wondering what the current piece of music, if you happen to know it.
I haven't got it listed. I think I stopped doing the music research on this last bit of the last episode. Possibly because it's repeating.
Oh, yeah.
He's used a few bits of music time and again, or he uses different sections or mixes them slightly differently. I can find out though for you, definitely.
I think you guys are ultimately right. A longer Beatles track sums up what one of the better, longer kind of White Album era Beatles tracks, or Day in the Life or something like that, or that one that you guys were talking about, maybe sums up the feeling of how great this cigar is, which involves having a reasonably high opinion of the Beatles, but you know what I mean.
Well, you're experiencing something. I mean, to go back to my chum Mark Fisher again. I mean, at the end of his life, before he unfortunately committed suicide, he was developing a theory which was kind of real but kind of a joke, which he called acid communism, and it was a sort of whimsical attempt to sort of overcome this, the capitalist realism he talked about, the sense that there's no alternative to the way we do things now, yeah, and he was talking about a sort of thing that Navarro has been talking about going back to kind of a class-based politics, but he was talking about sort of merging it with a kind of psychedelic consciousness as well, in a way to walk away from this system. And it did engage these kinds of parts of, pleasure and play. And, it was a kind of, as I said, it was kind of a joke essay in a way, but there was elements of it that people thought, oh yeah, maybe there just does need to be some sort of playful rejection of the systems that we're in, not to engage.
During this segment, I'm getting quite a lot of almond croissant. It's a very strange taste for the cigar to develop into, but it's complex, This is anyway. Let's carry on.
Yeah.
2014, a group of psychologists working with Facebook announced that they had found a way to put hidden messages into people's news feeds that would then create specific moods and feelings without the individuals being aware of it. It was the moment when the psychologists' theories of priming or nudging fused with the power of the new technology, and it seemed to show that manipulation could work on an industrial scale. But when it was revealed, it also had another unintended effect. It began to sow a dark suspicion into people's minds, because they no longer knew whether what they were feeling or thinking was their own, or really coming from outside sources. But for the machines, that was no problem, because suspicion was also another perfect high arousal emotion that they could feed off. And suspicion was about to spread uncontrollably across the internet, because into this mix came two terrible shocks. The first was Brexit, the other was the election of Donald Trump. The shock of both these was enormous, especially for the liberal classes, who had always seen themselves as protecting the working class. They protested, but the shock was so intense that many...
What's a very interesting thing to consider? How many of those people who were on that march, we reject the president-elect in 2016, ended up voting for Trump either in 2020 or 2024? Because mathematically, they must exist. I find that a fascinating thing, because there were quite a lot of kind of lib dem, shit lib dem types who then ended up as Trump voters by 2020 or even more in 2024. How does that happen? And is that what's the alchemical process that Trump was kind of using to get people on that journey? Because everybody started off at some point kind of not liking him, and then you convince yourself you do like him, but by being annoyed by the people who, I don't know how that process works, and then at some point you come out the other end, as most of us have. It was
advantage taking of a narrative of powerlessness that people like Trump were able to exploit, that was genuinely felt, and it was on both sides of the political spectrum.
Well, also, I mean, very, very useful mechanism for rebuilding engagement with the system. because that's what Trump effectively did. You created this force by which nobody could really be disengaged. You either had to be worried about this incoming apparently fascist dictator, or kind of this at the time sort of, oh, I'm a renegade. I think Trump is great. He's gonna own the libs and drain the swamp and this kind of thing. And it was very much a kind of Marmite effect. In those early days, there was practically no disengagement at all. Whereas you compare that to the kind of after Biden and then Trump too, there was much more just kind of general sort of apathy towards it because it had just become the new normal.
My sense is that the moment where Trump truly lost it, his magic, because Trump himself is a kind of wizard, I've said before, kind of Time Lord, weird figure that can seemingly alter reality to his own whim, right? But I think the moment where he lost that was actually during the Iran war, where everybody collectively kind of started checking out, like, it doesn't really matter what he says.
Yeah.
So the trick, like, the magic doesn't work anymore. Because not like
well,
now, like, do you care? When was the last time he said something? Do you care? No. Can you remember?
No, exactly.
No.
I mean, you can't really go back from that whole a whole civilization will die tonight and then just nothing happening, because they have to, as you say, how do you then rebuild any trust in anything he says being related to reality after that? And also just the way that that fake assassination attempt occurred recently in the whole world, even the kind of liberal media just greeted it with this overwhelming shrug of apathy.
Do you know what? Was that last week or the week? I'd already forgotten. I'd already forgotten that.
2 weeks, I think, if that.
Oh my goodness!
I'd sort of forgotten about it, and then the other day I went with my mum and dad's for dinner, and they brought it up and said it was fake. They don't believe, they don't disbelieve anything. They're like conspiracy theories are a complete other realm to them, but they thought it was fake as well.
So Trump is a busted flood. Whatever power he had is kind of like he's lost it now for some reason.
Curtis had a little bit about this in about this period, and remember he was talking 5 years ago now when they'd just come out of Biden winning the election and a sense that things might change. But he had a little passage where he talked about things like QAnon, and he said Trump benefited because things like QAnon explained why he wasn't doing anything. And he says the New York Times benefited from the hysteria because it just got masses and masses of clicks. Otherwise, they might have had really serious financial problems. The liberals benefited from it because they avoided having to face up to the fact that they didn't have an explanation for how to counter Trump's attractiveness. And the spies benefited from it as well because it made them look grand again, when in fact they're completely useless. And Vladimir Putin benefited from it because it made him seem strong at the very moment people like Alexei Navalny were rising up and beginning to channel opposition against him, which you're seeing now again and again. So all these people who were desperately trying to cling on to power and who had run out of a story to tell themselves and other people found in this hysteria a wonderful way to hold on to power in this desiccated, dried up way. And I just think it may be near its end. That was Curtis in 2021.
And I think one of the things that perhaps even Curtis may have underestimated, or everybody may have underestimated, was the manifold ways in which the system / Trump / the whole hype cycle was able to draw people back in after they'd already checked out,
reconfigure, repermutate.
And what was it that did that? It was the whole story arc of them arresting Trump, trying to kill Trump, and it was the whole the lawfare, the many different lawsuits that were against him, going after his family. That was like watching a soap opera, like watching a TV drama or something like that. And that was the thing that won him the 2024 election and got everybody back on board after they checked out of the last movie, which was basically the January the 6th saga cycle, which had its own cast of characters like Sidney Powell and the Kraken and Rudy Giuliani and all. This is like what This is like talking about old TV series we used to watch.
And I remember that video, the one that you commented on, where they all got together and they couldn't, they just couldn't get it together at all. And I've got a friend who sort of DMs me. He's got a mate, elsewhere in the country who still believes in the QAnon. I didn't realize the QAnon stuff was still going, that they're still going, oh yeah, this is what's happening. This is what's stopping Trump doing everything great.
Imagine the person running that. Imagine the person who runs Q, the account.
Yeah.
When Trump was nearly, he was struck by the bullet slightly, wasn't he? Like hit, grazed by a bullet. Was it about nearly 2 years ago now?
Yeah.
Because I don't watch the news at all. I don't even, I don't follow any like news app or like I don't get any news feed in any way other than that I go on X or Facebook or whatever. But all I heard of events like that are that they are an event on X. But I remember on the night that he was shot or just slightly hit, it was declared by just, I don't know, people on X. It was just declared that this will win him the presidency. Like that was just a line, issued by Trump supporters, as though by design, right? As though it was planned. I'm not saying it was. I have no idea, but and just sort of like 2016, and the way people like this on the screen reacted and so on. Like, I spoke to people the next day who were like very anti-Trump, and one of them, they were like really, really annoyed. They said it was because he stood up and went fight, 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 and because that incites violence, which is just ridiculous. But really, what it was that A, this is going to help him, and it obviously did help him, and B, that they hoped he would be killed, like they wished he was killed. And both sides, I swear, like you could just see them walking into a noose or something, like a pen, a fighting pen or something. It's bizarre, like but I would just say, like, if you cut yourself off from the news completely, you do actually benefit in that way. You're obviously ignorant of events as they unfold, but you really get rid of the main source of slop, and it all seems more external, and you can have more perspective on it.
And as AA said, when you get to a certain age, you've seen these cycles play out before, so you know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
See, I'm poor at that, but in that instance, I did see it because, cutting yourself off from the news really does help. It is the main slop channel.
You just too many late nights, too many electoral cycles, too many disappointments, and you kind of you pick up a certain rhythm, and you think, oh yeah, it's not just me.
So anyway, let's carry on.
By the way, somebody in chat just noticed. By the way, just look on the left-hand side of the picture, the size of that guy compared to the other police officers.
He's like Police Academy, isn't he?
He's about 8 foot tall or something.
Do you remember what was his name? The Mountain or something in Police Academy? Do you remember the
yeah.
Tower? What was it called?
High Tower.
High Tower.
It's the other way around. The other guys are barely taller than the cars. They're malnourished. They're about 5'3", and he's just about a strapping 6'1".
The thing is, you go to America, and most people are kind of like massive and 6 foot. I mean, I met a group of American Marines once, and they were fucking enormous.
Right.
I mean, and I just thought, all Americans must be like that. They're just a giant people, but he's a super giant.
I mean, people who get plenty of, I think, protein and other minerals, other stuff in your diet definitely makes you grow bigger, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What happens to these other guys?
They're probably just normal men, and he's just very, very tall.
Yeah.
And they're like Hispanics or something.
Look at that power stance.
How tall will the car be? They look. I mean, you can't tell from the angle, but like they don't look much taller than the car, do they? Then the car will only be like 4'6" or something.
Average people are quite tall today. I mean, I'm standard average height for the 1970s, which is 5'8". But most young people.
That's my height, Simon. I'm 5'8" as well.
Yeah, that's the sort of genetic times that we lived in. But now, like even girls are taller than me. I mean, 18-year-olds are like 6'1" or so. They seem very tall. Someone said manlet in the chat.
I found it difficult to process what had happened. They couldn't imagine why the people had not only turned against them and their benign care, but also seemed to have voted against their own best interests. And to explain it, they latched on to the idea.
Ever been out with a girl who's taller than you, Simon?
I've tried. I quite like tall Germanic blondes, but they don't go for me.
Well, you haven't tried tried it on with all of them, have you?
Not all of them, no. I'm working my way through the 80 million people in Germany to see if I can find one.
I think you can be more specific than that. Like going through all of them, you're wasting time.
That's true. I need to sort of some way to parse the Teutonic female population.
It just reminds me a bit in The Trip. Did you guys ever watch The Trip?
I love that show. Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, I thought it was great. And at one point, he says, it says here, like he's reading from the paper. It says here that Warren Beatty slept with, I can't remember, like 20,000 women, and he said, like 20,000 is about the population of Port Talbot. so he slept with half the women in Port Talbot. I guess. Well, no, sorry. He says 40,000 is the population. So he says, no, because half the population of Port Talbot's men. So he slept with all the women in Port Talbot. I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
If you've been to Port Talbot, you'll believe that as well. I've one of the things that always gave me solace, Simon, as a 5'8" man, is that Al Pacino was 5'5", or is 5'5", and so is Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
So if Tom Cruise and Al Pacino, with their 5'5" of height, can pull the sorts of girls they have in their lifetimes.
It's the height that forged the British Empire and sent the Spanish Armada to the bottom of the deep blue briny.
But also, it's the height of Napoleon, isn't it? No, he was even shorter, probably.
He was overcompensating.
It's present. Okay. Look, those two guys, Pacino and Cruise, have got presence, haven't they? Presence.
Yeah.
Presence. I mean, it helps if you film them put the camera like from below so they look taller or whatever. But you know, they have presence, and I always remember my copy of Scarface. Initially, I had taped it off TV, and it had one of those like pretentious introductions from Mark Cousins. Right? Do you remember what they used to put on like a film?
I used to enjoy him. He was a guy who spoke with a very quiet Northern Irish accent.
Yeah, Northern Irish accent.
This film,
and like a 10-minute breakdown of Scarface before. Yeah. And in his 10-minute breakdown, he was like, "Oh, look at the mise en scène. Look at how small De Palma makes him." You know, and then there were these shots where Tony Montana is like a tiny little figure on the screen, and it's in those moments where you can see that Pacino's not a very big man. You know what I mean? But you can look at him in other scenes or in other movies, and you'd never know he was only 5'5". So you know, yeah, I have been out with a few girls who are taller than me, and yeah, it's fun. It's fun. Anyway, let's carry on.
Idea of hidden manipulation. That thousands of voters in America and in Britain had been manipulated online without them realizing it. But then things became more complicated, because evidence has started to come out from the world of science that questioned the whole idea that people could be manipulated in such a way. Psychology researchers had tried to repeat a number of the most important experiments that were the foundations of modern behavioral psychology. They were astonished to find that again and again, when they repeated the experiments, they failed to get the original results. It seemed that much of the evidence for priming just wasn't there. It got so bad that one of the most famous psychologists in the world, who had promoted the idea of priming, Daniel Kahneman, wrote an open email to the science of psychology. "I see a train wreck looming," he said. "We have become the poster child for doubts about the integrity of psychological research." Kahneman was frightened because it was undermining the idea that he had helped create, that in the human brain were systems that the conscious self was unaware of, but which you, the psychologist, could trigger unconsciously.
Pause, please.
But it also...
AA, do you want to remark on this at all in relation to anything?
No, not really. I feel like we've been over Kahneman stuff quite a bit. But I mean, generally speaking, I think Kahneman is right about lots of things with regard to this sort of stuff. Even though people have said that there's a what do they call it? reproduction. What do they call it in science?
Yeah, replication crisis.
Replication. That's the word I'm looking for. There's a replication problem with some of these things where other people have tried to do the same, try to produce the same results, and they haven't been able to do it. So that's one of the knocks against behavioral psychology. But I mean, as far as I can see, more or less his diagnosis of how people think is correct.
Yeah, I think reality does have that complexity where it can oscillate between, the post hoc justification for things, and the point that Curtis is making with the end of this series is that he's optimistic that people are not so, let's put it this way, taken in by the current atmosphere of let's say the scientism enforcing an idea that we're kind of unaware of things going on. Curtis is saying, well, actually, we are capable of being rational beings who are aware of things as well. He's kind of wanting to sort of rebalance that somewhat, because in a way, the idea of you being unaware of things, it goes back to the beginning of what he was saying at that clip, that in the US and in Britain, and this still persists at this very moment, is an idea of a false consciousness going on, that we're, in Britain, we're all being manipulated by Putin, and when you look at the reality, it just doesn't seem to be borne out. It seems to be a heavy narrative peddled by the likes of, the intelligence service's favorite newspaper, the Daily Telegraph, that there's this massive threat coming, from dear old Putin, which Curtis is saying he can lean into as a source of power by being built up in the way that Al-Qaeda, was built up in the Power of Nightmares. But it becomes a super overwhelming threat. And a sort of mythic level of threat then, which is fantastic for mobilizing people. I'm not saying I'm not saying I love Vladimir Putin. What I'm saying is I think there's an extent to which he's been somewhat over amplified as a bogeyman at this moment. Certainly in Europe and in America, different things obtain as well, and some of the same things obtain. But that's where we're at.
I absolutely have. You say the Telegraph. I noticed it in the Times, but I mean, I started noticing it around the time of that Litvinenko killing. Not that. I mean, that does look like Russian agents did that. But we're talking 2005 or 6, and I especially noticed it when there was that first Orange Revolution in Ukraine stuff. But yeah, parts of the British media seem to work with, I don't know, the Foreign Office or elements in the Foreign Office or MI6 or something. And they have an agenda to, I don't know why, but they want to break up Russia or overthrow Putin and impose somebody, I don't know. But yeah, it's the same sort of people that obviously have been interfering with Ukraine for years, and Georgia, and where, if they can, other places, Poland, Estonia, they link up with all these forces. Obviously, they link up with neocons and people like Victoria Nuland and Anne Applebaum and elements in the State Department. But they had an agenda, and it goes back at least 20 years. I first noticed it then, so it must be older than that.
Yeah, and you could say there are both domestic elements of population, perception management, and there are sort of external geopolitical agendas that, can be going on both at the same time.
Yeah, but I couldn't help but notice, by the way, given that we're talking about Putin, that old Dugin completely lost it on Twitter to the point where it was trending. I'm trying to ignore everything, but he went on a massive rant saying, like, Western civilization is over, it doesn't deserve to exist anymore, white people are slaves and all this sort of stuff. I was like, bloody hell. So tell us how you feel, Alexander. But
did you see
that was an unfortunate freak out from Dugin. Anyway, carry on.
Did you see that burn he got from Dickie Spencer?
I did see that. Yeah, that was
sorry. Burn is a bad word to use.
That was harsh from Dickie. I would say very harsh, but
bit much.
What did he say? I thought they were buddies.
He said, I think he said something like, "I think your daughter was really hot" or something, and it was a picture of Dugin seeing his daughter's car on fire from when she was still by.
Bit much from Dickie.
Why? Why do that?
It was just flashing back at Dugin, but I mean,
Dugin was going on a bit of a freak out, to be honest, but
both pricks. And
still, it was a low blow from Dickie, which I disavow as well. So.
Drunk or something.
Yeah.
No, courting engagement. Sorry to put it that way, but that's what people are doing.
Sure.
So had wider implications. because it meant that companies like Cambridge Analytica, who claimed that they could alter the way people behaved by priming, might just be exploiting the hysteria and the suspicion. The truth was that you might be able to keep millions of people in a state of constant anxiety online by bombarding them with memes, but you couldn't alter underneath what they thought and what they believed. People might be far stronger than the scientists believed. But it was too late, because once you believe you are being manipulated, there is no way back. Even being told you are not being manipulated might be manipulation. The liberal opposition became lost in an endless conspiracy theory, constantly searching for hidden clues, links, and fragments of evidence to prove that really Vladimir Putin and firms like Cambridge Analytica had orchestrated Brexit and the election of Donald Trump. It was a mood of hysteria that ran out of control.
Pause, please.
Whether the president...
Suddenly I find myself really proud of Curtis. I didn't realise he was... I actually earlier on thought he was edging into like Cadwallader territory. It shows how much I misunderstand him sometimes. But do you remember the Cadwallader moment, like 2018? Like they really believed they were onto something that was going to reverse Brexit or something.
Yeah.
And it was so pathetic. It was like, what? You've exposed nothing. You've just exposed the normal workings of a company. Not normal, but, you know, completely legal workings of a company. And you're just trying to make it sound like we all have to change our minds now. It was fucking ludicrous. It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
But they really thought that was good journalism.
And again, like QAnon, it still has traction. I mean, I think Cadwallader's just started a new publication that Stuart Lee writes for called, I think it's called The Nerve or something like that.
What, Stuart Lee po-faced, I assume?
Yeah, he writes a column for it. I think I tweeted something from it a little while back, you know. But there's a big group of people who are convinced, you know. Again, it's a favourite theme of the old left, you know, that, you know, well, the proles are existing in a state of false consciousness. It's up to them to alert them, you know, and if we alert them to the truth, they'll rise up, etc., etc. Popular overthrow, revolutionary overthrow of the system, etc., etc.
There's quite a long Stuart Lee appearance from a couple of weeks back that I haven't got round to watching yet, but he was talking about the crisis in creativity. Have you happened to watch that, Simon?
Was it that interview with that Asian comedian, the one that I put?
I can't remember exactly what it just came up on my timeline because you know, YouTube has worked out that I like Stuart Lee. Yeah. So it always chucks me Stuart Lee stuff. But
is that guy Nish Kumar, was it? Sorry,
something like that. He's got very serious lately, and sort of he's getting exercised about media and politics and that sense of manipulation. And he's been talking a lot about that. It's sort of it's a much darker stew than normal. Looks more kind of haunted and strained.
Interesting.
The United States was a Russian agent. Let me say that again. Whether the US president might have been working for the Russians.
The walls closing in.
As it appears the walls are closing in terms of the Mueller investigation. The walls are closing in.
The walls are closing in.
I do feel...
I mean, how ridiculous, I mean, the Mueller investigate, how ridiculous is this scene now? Like all these years later. Fucking nonsense that was wasted on that.
Because it's all a very specific narrative that they're pushing, they always end up using the same catchphrases, don't they? Because they're all in the same group chats and media.
Oh, it's just emergent behaviour. A little cheeky bit from Curtis using the music from the Star Wars Crash Compactor as well, by the way.
It's to trigger the response in the viewer, isn't it? Because the viewer probably is too stupid to realize they're hearing the same phrase. And it's sort of like that, the CIA activation technique where, you know, you subconsciously train someone to do an assassination or something, and then you trigger them by saying something, you know, you say Red Lobster, or something, and then they suddenly break into their fugue state and start killing. It's a lesser version of that.
That is also done. It must be done in like critical theory and stuff like, and what's it called, like post-colonial theories and stuff. It's, the same shit. Because people always use that phrase, Britain's wealth. They can't vary the phrasing, right? It has to be this. Britain's wealth is built on the backs of whatever, oppression or slavery or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I think that's slightly more of a mimetic thing, because it's just them copying the phrase, whereas I think this is quite deliberate.
These guys are all actually choosing to do this. It's not
as in they probably had a meeting, or they were in a Zoom call or a WhatsApp group where they specifically agreed to use the phrase. I mean, it's a bit like what the J'accuse people were doing a few weeks ago, where they all came out and used the word peasant in the same tweet.
It wasn't explicitly revealed. It was an email round robin list the New York Times had, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was actually talked about, I think, at the time.
What, use these phrases? They're so counterproductive. They're so because it's so easy. There's this guy Matt Orfala. This might be a Matt Orfala video he's showing here, and he just makes these compilations of quick fire. The walls are closing in. Walls. Bombshell. They keep choosing and there's hundreds of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's much more current in it's obviously, as Hat says, it still goes on in there's group chats where people are coordinating these things in this particular way. This is a strong meme, use this. But again, I mean, you tweeted something the other day about WWE and the sort of the jargon that we insist on using this word, not that word. And then that goes back into a friend of mine who was in TV about 25 years ago. He used to be the showrunner for Neighbours in Australia, and they would give them a show Bible saying, you don't talk about this concept, you use this word. You don't talk about abortion, you talk about a woman's right to choose, right? So you always have the sanitized lingo that you put in, and it's as explicit as that.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Because I mean, as I said in the video this morning, words have power, and that's why the people who really matter care about which specific words you use. One of the ones that Vince banned that interested me is that he banned people saying I and me. That's a very difficult one to practice. I was talking about the different exercises that you can do, Simon. One of the ones that you can do is do this exercise where I might put in an elastic band around your wrist, right? And every time you say I or me in a whole week, give yourself pull that elastic band, make it slap on you, and then note down how many times you've done it to try to not say it. It is so hard. I could only last a couple of days. It's so difficult, especially if you've got a YouTube channel, right? But just in daily life and so on, it is so hard. So I was really surprised to see Vince making his staff and the wrestlers and all the people on screen not use I and me. I mean, that's an almost impossible command from Vince. But anyway, let's carry on. Of course, there's a version where you do it where you don't use an elastic band. You just cut. You actually cut to make a little cut. Obviously, people don't do that anymore because it's a bit extreme. All right, let's carry on.
That he feels the walls closing in on him.
Legal walls are closing in on Donald Trump tonight.
From a Democratic perspective, this is the president who feels like the walls are closing in.
As he feels the walls are closing in.
I think he's feeling the Russia investigation. I think he's feeling the walls closing in on him.
Get it right.
But what had really been manufactured by the hysteria and the suspicion was a constant source of those high arousal emotions that the machines needed. They didn't care about the meaning of what people thought or felt about Donald Trump. They just fed off the waves of paranoia, making the technology companies ever more profitable and powerful. But many of those old institutions who had been sidelined also found that by promoting the suspicions, they could regain their power.
Trump is about to call me. Can't trust what they tell us.
If you truly do you ever watch Game of Thrones? there's a whole season where Arya Stark in Game of Thrones is training to be an assassin, and she meets this guy. I forget his name. Like his name's like Hagar or Jagar or something, and he's got this really mysterious way of talking where he's like, "Oh, a girl is scared," and things like that. Where he's talking like he never refers to her by her name. He says, a girl has no name and things like that. And when you're trying to avoid saying I and me, you end up using really weird formulations like that, where it's almost like Yoda speak or something. So yeah, try it for a day and see if you don't turn yourself potty. That was beyond my capabilities, that one, Simon. Not saying I and me. But,
interesting thing about what Curtis is talking about here, though, he's talking about this idea of the use of suspicion, as again another kind of a trigger for high arousal engagement. And I don't know if people remember, but years ago, the film Brazil, Terry Gilliam film from 1986.
Yeah.
And it's got sort of parodies of kind of Orwellian slogans on walls and posters and things. And one of the ones I remember that he used in Brazil was a quote, "Suspicion breeds confidence."
Interesting, yeah, because that's obviously the opposite of the truth, isn't it?
Yeah.
One of the very interesting things about this whole idea, though, is that there is a space that is, I wouldn't say it's adjacent to us, but it's somewhere over there, isn't it? Your friend Dellingpole may be in this kind of space, but there is a kind of area, the true kind of conspiracy schizo zone, where everything's a psyop. Literally everything's a psyop. Everything that happened isn't real. Every major attack was a false flag. We talked about this before. People have got into trouble, haven't they? There was that guy who believed that the Ariana Grande thing was fake, and he ended up being taken to court for it and sued and all of that.
Richard Hall, yeah.
Yeah. And I do think that that's an epistemically dangerous place to end up as well, because you can just kind of go crazy because you don't have anything to hold on to then.
Yeah. Well, in a way, it's what the Canadian psychiatrist Eric Byrne, in his form of what he called transactional analysis, would have called a life script. And essentially, he saw people as pathological, in terms of pathological behaviors, behaviors that are ruining your life, as people who are committed to playing a life script. Now, a script is a kind of a set of lines and dialogue that an actor plays, but they're fixed and they have sort of no contingency about them. They have a determined path and an ending with what you call a payoff at the end, the last line of the play that, reveals everything. Yeah. And there's a lot of people who play out scripts. So they're classically, these days we're aware, for instance, the classic, woman who's past being young is getting into middle age and she's surrounded by cats and the glass of Chardonnay and all men are terrible. And that's the kind of, in a way, she's playing out a script. And in the payoff line in her script is, "Oh, well, all men are bastards." Yeah. So it's a kind of thing that you pat yourself on the back with as this kind of reassurance. It's rather, you may be in a bad place, but the pattern that you keep repeating is familiar and therefore reassuring. And a lot of the people, I think, who play into the sort of parts of the conspiracy sphere are playing a script in which you can always pat yourself on the back and say, well, they're all wrong uns, they're all paedophile Satanists, and everything is bad and we can't do anything about it. But of course, it also gives you the get out of, you don't have to take any kind of action in life.
Here's a question though, Simon. Let's take this seriously a second.
Sure.
Maybe in a strange way, I'm thinking of there's one called Miri AF.
Oh yeah.
There's Dellingpole. There's a few. There's the People's Information or whatever. So there's those people to whom everything is a psyop, everything is controlled, everything's fake. And then there's people like somebody like Eastern Gammon Worshipper, the notorious Tory boy on Twitter. For him, everything's real. There are no psyops. There are no fake false flags, anything. He takes everything straight up. He questions nothing. He accepts all official narratives. Okay, to the point where he did as he was told during COVID. He supports Britain against Russia in the Ukraine war. He questions nothing. He is like a machine man, Easter Gammon worshipper. You know, and in fact, I discovered something about him that made a lot of things make sense. Where, of course, Easter Gammon, and I should have seen this earlier, is you know, he likes men. That's why he likes Madonna. That's why, you know, so I figured out that Easter Gammon worshipper is gay, which in a weird way explains a lot. It explains a lot because it means that he's one of. I mean, I'm not saying that. All gay men are Tory boys. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is there's a certain type of gay guy who I've met in my life that, in a strange way, does become a system man like this. I've met them, and they're actually very good at working their way up the company and things like that, getting promotions at work. And it seems like Easter Gammon worship is one of these sorts of guys. But here's where I'm going with this, Simon. Compare those two with us, with all of us on this panel. Now, with us, we're like, well, is this one real? Is this not? You know, maybe this Trump shooting was fake and that one was real. Or, you know, I believe this, but I don't believe that. So, you know, who is the real sick man in this society? Is it me, or is it the businessman with his suit and tie? Now, you know what I'm saying, Simon, right? I'm saying that I wonder if it's us who's the most uncertain, who has the... those two people, the two extremes, have epistemological certainty in their own strange way, and we don't, because we're not sure.
Yes. The way of the sage is to know, but to think that one does not know. Lao Tse.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Okay, I think you're right. There's something, as you say, about a terrible certainty about things. I mean, I'm not saying I'm right about anything. I'm frequently wrong about things. I'm happy to, you know, as Dennis Potter said, visibly change my mind in public. You know, I'm not one of these arseholes who says, you know, oh, it'll change my mind when new evidence comes in, because that can be a bit sort of pompous. But yeah, I mean, you know, I think having a certain level of doubt, but you can also build your confidence in your knowledge by knowing that you do maintain that. You know, I'm open to the possibility I'm completely wrong. That's fine. I won't suffer for that. I'll gain for learning.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. You see, I mean, I think you can get certainty about some things, and there's other things that you just don't know.
Yeah.
And that this is surely healthier than thinking you have the answer to all things.
And you know, you talk about that particular character on Twitter. You know, there is this thing of, as you say, there's people who kind of, you know, their uncertainty and their doubt are largely hidden. You know, that's they hide it from themselves. They hide a lot of actual truths from themselves.
It's a lack of radical honesty, Simon. A lack of radical honesty, in my opinion. Anyway, okay, carry on.
It aligns. I mean, there was a very scathing article about this series by a writer for The Critic called Dominic Green online. And I looked into Dominic Green, I looked into the review, and he's kind of one of these characters. He's kind of a bit like Seb Gorka. It's kind of this sort of phony, robust Britishness, you know. It's this sort of carefully tapping all the right cultural touchstones. You know, his Twitter feed, it's like a sort of very deft, syncretic kind of simulation of true blue, you know, in a way where all of the conditionals behind it, the priors, they stay tastefully hidden. Yeah. So as long as you agree to the fine print, you know, of backing a certain very elastic concept of who is defined as being British, you know, the sort of populist chimera of what, you know, the Nigel Farage version of an idea of it, then you know, then you go with it. Yeah. But it's a very dead form of truth, and it turns into the kind of biscuit tin or Spitfire bulldog models of nation. You know, he's kind of he writes this article, and he takes pleasure, obviously, in kind of dissing the series. And I'm not attacking him for dissing the series, but it's the way he does it that's disingenuous. He's kind of determined to prove his case by actually not acknowledging what Curtis is doing. He's trying to upset. You know, there's a lot of detailed, separate threads that Curtis is offering. Yeah. And he's trying to break that up and mix it all together and say, oh, look, this is nonsense. It's like, you know, it's like a guy who wanders into like a party where there's a big buffet, and, you know, he starts grabbing handfuls of the cocktail sausages and throwing them into the trifle. You know, and then he knocks over the champagne into the hors d'oeuvres, and then he says, "Oh, look what a disgusting mess this is." You know, he's kind of someone like that.
And there is, I mean, this is not like a specifically a knock at New Culture Forum, but I can imagine them having a guy like this on, you know. And I mean, I've been on New Culture Forum myself, so I'm not like, but there's a kind of arid patriotism.
Yeah,
that kind of does the rounds in spaces.
Strained linear thinking.
Arid. Yes,
that's the word, arid.
Major newspapers in America and in Britain that might have gone bankrupt without Donald Trump were rescued by the continual waves of conspiracy theories they revealed.
Oh, I'm getting salt from this now. This is such a good cigar, by the way. It's still going, by the way. 1 hour 40, and I've still got about a third of it left. That's the glory of the Churchill.
While the intelligence agencies, who only a few years before had been hated because they had invented the weapon.
I mean, one of my dreams is to get that. What's his name? Rafe Heidelboodle.
Rafe Heidelmanku.
Yeah, it's to get him not on camera. But just in a room in a real life setting where a few of us are having a drink or whatever, and to just have like an honest like moment where I can help to deconstruct Churchill with him, to see
gentle challenge,
to see whether he's capable of the sort of honesty, you know, to whether I can shake some of that arid patriotism I'm trying to get at here. You know what I mean? That artfully constructed sense of Englishness, thing that they all go for.
Yeah, and to wit, you know, the point in this series that Kurt has used phrasing which has triggered people I've seen sometimes in the chat, and he's talked about, you know, going back to a nostalgic vision of Britain's past that wasn't true. Yeah, he's not saying that the past that actually happened in Britain wasn't true. He's talking about the way that it was extracted and funneled into cultural tropes, the end result of which is someone like Nigel Farage, where the version of the past you get is the biscuit tin nationalism. It, you know, if you're middle class, you get the biscuit tin. If you're working class, you get the Bulldog and Spitfire nationalism. Yeah, you get these very distilled kind of like, you know, we had the footage earlier in the series of the fake British town in China. That's what Kurtz is saying. He's not saying we didn't have the actual reality of our past is interesting. It is complex. It's much deeper and more satisfying than the stuff that you're getting processed through culture. And that's where he's looking at this act of myth making.
Of mass destruction now became heroic truth tellers, revealing ever more hidden conspiracies. And Vladimir Putin.
Here we come again, the wide walk. The wide walk.
Whose power in reality was becoming increasingly fragile at home in Russia, became in the eyes of the West a dark, malevolent force, which made him seem far stronger than he really was.
Has anybody ever set Putin's wide walk to that Ride of the Valkyries? You know, the one they play at the start of Apprentice. It would go so well. You know, the swagger of Putin's wide walk.
You mean the Dance of the Knights?
Yeah, you know, it's the one that they play at the start of The Apprentice. I mean, it's pretty overplayed now, but it's a magnificent piece of music.
By Prokofiev. Yeah,
that's the one.
What is that? Is that from? Is that like different from Montagues and Capulets by Prokofiev?
Well, it's from his Romeo and Juliet, isn't it? I think.
Okay. I've never watched The Apprentice, so I don't know how this tune goes. It's not crucial. Don't worry. Move on.
I mean, you don't have to have seen The Apprentice, Horus. If you're on Twitter, one of the best follows available is Lord Sugar. Because he falls for... I mean, it doesn't matter how mundane the question, he's there answering. It'd be like, what's this? And it's like clearly like an egg whisk or something, and he'll just be like, egg whisk. Straight away, like, what's this? Lighter. You know, all day, every day. He just does boomer posts like this, and then occasionally there'll be some corporate post from the Apprentice team or whatever. It's incredible. One of the best follows on Twitter. Never fails to make me laugh. Straight in there every time. no messing about, 100% strike rate, Lord Sugar, spoon, just so steady, so solid. Anyway,
I just want to say something about Putin. There's this thing of we have a kind of we have a conflict in our country. Putin is seen as a kind of loyalty test to the West, isn't he? A loyalty to Britain or loyalty to America. You're not allowed to like Putin, and yet we feature him in memes. We kind of like his kind of killer lizard eyes and his kind of him clapping or smiling or something like that. And obviously Curtis is not saying Putin's a great guy. He's explicitly said it in interviews. I'm not saying he's great, but he is using myth at his own national level as well as a form of psychological and political management. Yeah. But maybe the reason he appeals to some of us in the West in one sense is he just at least represents something that contradicts and is a reaction to our own mythology, which, these artificial mythologies I'm talking about that are being stuffed down our throats. So we can kind of enjoy Putin as a figure who rejects that. And I'm just looking at his eyes here, looking at us, and it's almost like he's saying, I'm so tired of you all.
I think that's part of it, Simon.
Yeah.
But I think that there's another part of it, which is there's an aspect to which we like Putin in the way that you like Hans Gruber in Die Hard.
Yeah, exactly.
Or like just a swank Bond villain or something like that.
Yeah.
We kind of love a Hollywood villain, and he has been so sold to us as a villain.
Yeah.
That it's almost impossible not to kind of dig the villain part.
Do you remember from about 2010 to 2015 there were a lot of sort of edits and memes about Russia and about Putin? Sort of in Mother Russia, Granny can lift up a house and move it type thing. This sort of and I once spoke to somebody who was this very hardcore sort of NAFO, Ukraine, NATO, very anti-Russia. And he was obsessed with this idea that all that stuff was a preemptive sort of demoralization campaign by Russian intelligence to make Russia look like this country of sort of magic superheroes, which I don't believe for a second. I think it was just people memeing, because there's something inherently quite funny about stereotypes.
Was that guy Welsh?
No.
Oh, right. Okay, sorry.
It's just an interesting part of our age where we see these people who are set up as villains, like the last Ayatollah, for example, and the funny thing I've noticed,
and the mullahs as well. The phrase "the mullahs."
Yeah, the mad mullahs, and that sort of tabloid. But the thing about the last Ayatollah, I mean, I've noticed him come up in in places like Talk TV. Intelligence and military people. Well, it's great that we got rid of the mad Ayatollah. And I think, but none of you mentioned his 18-month-old daughter that got blown to bits as well. You never sort of say anything about that. And it's the thing of, there's the element of, you can take a liking to the villain because, remember in the preceding year, we had the whole romantic Ayatollah arc, hashtag woman is a flower.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
little bits of Rumi and all that.
Yeah,
sort
we
of
kind of
thing.
got to know him, didn't we? In a strange little way.
Yeah.
Just about the thing about sort of sometimes people, like NATO types and whatever, they exult in the nastiness, in the violence of war, because obviously, in the same way that I just think it draws upon the Second World War a lot. There's a bit of footage from the U.S. Congress in I don't know, it must be about 1943, 42, 43, and it's some congressman saying like the Russians have killed more Germans than everyone else put, and he's like exulting in how much killing, specifically how many, like the number of German people killed, right? And I assume it sort of ties back into Curto, like the whole way along from the original what was it called, the Ocean Apart, right? All through Curto, I think there's been some some awareness of like specifically the figure of Churchill, and obviously the bombing of cities has been part of the kind of enduring myth. Like Britain's I assume every country has this, like, but Britain in particular has is, like Churchill and stuff, and it seems to be the same sort of like bloodlust was kind of enthroned in a way, like, but not for its own sake, not because these people are bloodthirsty, but because it's an homage to Churchill. bizarrely. But I imagine other countries have an equivalent as well.
This is a weird aspect of the psyche of the Tory boy Easter Gammon type. Genuinely very nasty when it comes to certain, like, glorying in Bomber Harris and kind of relishing in
bomb the brown people and all of that
killing
stuff.
of the Ayatollah's family, and they genuinely get that kind of. That's why I've always maintained that the Tory boy is the worst amongst us, worse even than the frothing at the mouth blue-red feminists. I think I put the Tory boy below even them, because they're just horrible people.
And these are people who are always saying and using as an excuse that you have to sort of sell yourself to the public, that you have to appear more left-wing or you go with left-wing stuff. And then suddenly they're like extremely right-wing when it comes to violence against your enemies in war. And then just somehow that doesn't there's no contradiction there. Ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is one of many reasons why I'm not a rightoid. But, I even felt there was a bit of it around the whole, like, kicking that guy in the head the other day. The one who did the Golders Green attack. I mean, I don't know that much about police work, but they seem like they went in a bit hard. But the way people were relishing it and kind of fist pumping and loving it just feels, I don't know.
Yeah,
just feels weird to me.
To be honest, from my past work in the defense industry, so I do know a bit about armed police techniques, and it's perfectly legitimate to apply a boot to a head when you're holding a weapon at somebody. It's just a technique they're taught. I've seen it. It happened years ago when I lived in Brixton. The police did it with some lads outside a nightclub and kicked them to the ground because they were pointing weapons at them to get down.
There's a guy in the chat saying that the Germans started carpet bombing first. That is not true. And I've read on the history of this very series. I read through Britain's Blunder by Peter Nichols, or was it in the final cigar stream? I can't remember, but you should go back and study the evidence and study what happened and study what people used to say, or the Revelo P. Oliver speech that I played the clip of a few weeks back. It is not the case that the Germans started carpet bombing first. That is not. They were retaliating. And there were many, many, many things like that during the Second World War, where the causality has been reversed because of the need to paint the Germans as the ultimate villains or the ultimate evil, or to try to exonerate any wrongdoing that Britain did. So yeah.
Anyway. Yeah, I didn't mean to start exonerating. I mean, I'm sure like Hitler's regime committed its share of crimes and atrocities. I think that is fair to say, even whatever you think. But it's just that. What Simon mentioned, the Ayatollah thing, like celebrating the death of the Ayatollah, just suddenly just takes me back all through the last sort of 80 or so years, and also the whole Curto series, because just there's some sort of image of Churchill in people's mind, and as I say, there's probably an equivalent in other countries, but the image of Churchill was like the righteous killer sort of thing. People draw upon that, and they try to live up to that. It's really strange, but they do.
The ultimate in boomer truth. And I maintain that until that notion of the always Churchill is gone, we will always be stuck in the boomer truth moment. Until that Churchill is gone, because it's actually ahistorical and strange. It's actually a deviation from what has always been. This notion,
and it warps us.
It warps everything. It warps morality. It warps foreign relations. It warps absolutely everything. So that's my personal view. Anyway, let's carry on.
Так, друзья, обрадуем жителей данного подъезда, повесим Владимира Владимировича прямо в лифт. Так, ровненько, ровненько, ровненько.
And to be clear, the charge against Churchill is that he actually opened the carpet bombing to try to encourage the Germans to carpet bomb us, because people weren't really up for the Second World War, and there was a need to try to win the support of the public over, and to they were struggling with recruitment. Obviously they had to resort to the draft in the end, but the charge against Churchill is that he deliberately provoked the Germans to do the blitzkrieg attacks and so on, and lots of people believe that. Lots of people believed it at the time, and that has actually become less of a narrative over time as people have died, and oral history has been replaced with court history of propaganda and actually history from Churchill himself. So
yes, and the amount of easily citable parts of Churchill's career that would paint him in a bad light just never get cited by all the court historians. I mean, he was on rather a thin edge for most of 1940 because there was a growing movement for peace, both among the people and among the elites of Britain. And there's something that was quoted from the diaries of Charles de Gaulle when he visited Churchill at Chequers in July of 1940, where he found Churchill on one summer's evening in the garden out the back, shaking his fist at the sky, going, "Why won't you come? Why won't you come?" Because he was desperate for German bombing raids on Britain, because that would then immediately justify a war.
It's interesting that you had that thing from the first Curtis, the Oceans Apart, that what you looked at, that has that willingness to question that mythology.
I think there has always been more of a willingness on half of certain parts of the British establishment to question the myth of Churchill. The myth of Churchill is kind of kept in place by Tory types, outer party types, as Curtis Yarvin would call them, certain American interests, let's just say American, quote unquote, who have it. It's part and parcel of support for neocon wars, of support for a certain type of truth regime, and so on. Which I feel like the left have not really been on board with since the 70s or the 80s, really. Which is why the left have typically not been up for the neocon wars. When I say the left, I mean the real left, not like Bill Clinton and people like this. I mean like actual leftists. Whereas the right, the mainstream right in any case, tends to be more willing to go along with this sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, you even get it back in the 70s. If people remember the documentary "The World at War," you've got sequences when it talks about the bombing, and they interview people who were, who were then pensioners, who had been in the war in London, and they talked about the experience of the bombing, and an incident that famously happened that they tell about in the East End. They were cleaning up, the rubble of the bombing and dragging out the burnt dead bodies of people, and Churchill came along on one of his jaunts and as people were cleaning up sort of shouted, "England can take it," and these people who were EastEnders said, and we told him where he could take it. They told him to get fucked.
God, that reminds me of who shouted "England can take it"? Like people with
Churchill was there. He was kind of cigar in mouth, doing one of his kind of PR things, watching people cleaning away the rubble, and he said, "England can take it." Oh. And the man who tells the anecdote says, and the women told him where to take it.
Yeah, so I mean, the myths about his love, like the love for him from the public, are particularly repulsive. It's complete bullshit. I'm sure a few people did, but
I mean, just to make this point absolutely clear. I mean, on the night of the infamous Coventry raid, Churchill used to drive away in the evening from London out to the countryside to avoid being in London during the bombing raids, despite the fact that he'd had a large private air raid shelter built just under Horse Guards. And this night he was in his car, and they just were heading away from Westminster, basically doing this secretly, because he would always drive back very early in the morning to give the impression to the people of London that he was in the city with them, good old Winnie. And just as he's leaving London, a dispatch rider on a motorbike comes flying up to the side of the car with an urgent message, hands it through the window, and it's from the Royal Air Force monitoring post, and it says that they've received intelligence that the German raid that night, an enormous raid has been planned, but not for London, but for Coventry. And Churchill has his driver turn around. They immediately go back to 10 Downing Street, where he appears, and all the staff there, all the staffers and the maids and everyone is there in the hallway, shocked because he never normally comes back, and they're all thinking there's going to be a raid. And he's holding the paper in his hand, folded, and he tells them that the most dolorous news has been received, that tonight an air raid will take place of the most enormous scale here in London, and I want to be here with you all as this goes on. And there's this great cheer. How brave, how brave. And of course, that night there isn't a raid on London. Not one bomb that night falls on London, but Coventry is razed to the ground, which goes to show just how sort of low and manipulative he could be at moments like that. Leveraging his own image when he knew full well that there was no raid on London. And that's quoted in the diaries of one of his personal aides that was published many years after the war.
It's funny, that's one of the things my dad told me decades ago, I think when I was a teenager, about Churchill, about he was driven out of London during the raids. I was quite surprised because I'd had the myth. But yeah.
Truly, he's one of the great he's one of the great scumbags of history, and I really, I mean, the day that the country gets itself back is the day when the country realizes that he's one of the worst leaders in our history. I maintain that to the day I die.
And just to be clear, while he had this enormous private air raid shelter built under Westminster, his wife was under the impression that this had been done at some scale for various other figures of importance, and that shelters were being built all through London, which wasn't the case. And most people just had to run to a tube station or hide in the basement. And she was shocked one night because she went to Buckingham Palace, and she discovered that the King and Queen used to spend the air raids in a small cupboard under the stairs. Which even the King didn't have an air raid shelter, but Churchill made sure he had one.
Wow.
I think you needed to be able to afford quite a bit of iron to make one and stuff. Like to dig, to dig a massive pit and stuff, and most people just couldn't afford to. There's also going into the tube stations. I mean, that did happen, but there was also that Bethnal Green stampede, right? Like nearly around 100 people were killed at Bethnal Green tube station trying to get in.
Yeah,
it's terrible
because that was all you had. Once you heard the siren, most people, of course, didn't have basements, or and if you did, it's not going to be enough to stop a bomb if the house collapses in on you. So you just have to run like hell to the nearest tube station. And of course, if you didn't make it, then you didn't make it, or if there wasn't enough room, or you got stopped on the way, or the one of the sick parts of our historiographical memory of the Blitz to me is the fact that it all gets remembered as this kind of sort of jolly good Blitz spirit. We're all in it. Where we could take it, and you see the pictures of the milkman still doing his rounds in the morning, which is fake, of course. That was a propaganda picture, and of course you might remember it. Can you imagine being alive in London then, with maybe a few young children, and every single night torrents of bombs are raining down on top of you? I mean, entire areas of London were just wiped out.
And the East End was hit again and again and again and again because of the Docklands. Just smashed.
Yeah,
it's terrible.
There was an awful incident where it was one of the I don't remember which company it was. It was some big conglomerate of it was a company that imported rum from the West Indies, and there was this warehouse that was full of about sort of several 100,000 large bottles of rum, and a bomb hit it, and you can imagine the inferno that went up. And it was if the scale of the fire and the people that would then subsequently burn to death, if that had happened outside of a war, it would be remembered as one of the great tragedies of British history. Really, really awful stuff going on.
You've always got to, and one of the things I remember even thinking as a schoolboy was, if Churchill was so great then, how come they just immediately voted him out massively in 1945? You'd think the great war hero would be voted back in, wouldn't you? But
it's not like anyone, and no one was excited for Clement Attlee, or anything like that. It's just because fuck Churchill. No, it's because Labour adopted the Beveridge report with enthusiasm and stuff. But it's it was the biggest landslide in British history, wasn't it, for Attlee?
Up until that time, I think. Yeah.
Отлично, кажется.
Твою мать!
О, ну что это?
I mean, there is some truth that the public wanted some of the socialist things that Attlee brought in. But you've got to remember that the British public, the normal British worker, had been asked to fight 2 world wars in recent history. And so there was I think there was a sense after World War II, it was like, well, what the hell have you guys done for us lately? So, you know, and the country was absolutely buggered and bankrupted by Churchill. So, you know, that there had to be some sort of massive government interventionist kind of thing at that time, because we were absolutely buggered.
And I think the one of the reasons that he was then subsequently re-elected as prime minister in the early 50s was because the years between the end of the war and then were so utterly bleak and miserable.
Yes.
Mainly because of the situation that the country found itself in, but also because one of the issues of the Attlee government was that it was very kind of dour and you know the kind of socialism that George Orwell used to complain about, where everyone's just a bit miserable and a bit sort of, you know, I think in 1951 a lot of the old memories of the Depression years and the early war had vanished, and I think maybe for some people a sense of nostalgia had set in, and Churchill and the Tories at that time represented something of a kind of sort of an almost return to Merry England, I think, you know, sort of Churchill with his cigars and his sort of portly waistcoat. You know, there was something of that I think people were genuinely happy to see again.
There was also a disappointment that some of the, I mean, it's almost whenever you get a big left wing win, there's a wave of enthusiasm that comes in, right? Like, think of Obama. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Remember all that Obama campaign? And then, like, by the end of his first term, well, nothing, I mean, you know. And I think there was a sense in the air after the Attlee ministry that all of the, like, you know, all the promises hadn't really made life that much better. And people had rations and people had, you know, it was fucking miserable. And so, and there was this sense that someone like Churchill represented, like, the empire, like bring back the empire or something, you know, better days, something like
and
this.
I think, and I think that was also quite a big issue. Just not so much as a kind of laid out policy, but just in terms of the, you know, I hate to use the term, but, you know, the sort of vibe of the government, where, you know, Churchill did have this reputation as, you know, not entirely incorrectly, as this diehard imperialist. And of course, in the 40s, you know, we'd got rid of India. We'd lost various other things, and I think there was kind of a sense of that the Tories might sort of recommit with this man who in the meantime had, of course, been venerated as a great statesman. You know, he'd gone around giving his famous speeches on the Iron Curtain, and the Americans suddenly were all over Churchill as this, you know, this great hero of Europe. And
he met regularly with he was meeting regularly, wasn't he, with the royals, and he was it was a celebrity by this point, Churchill was.
Yes, and the hero cult had very much set in by 1951. He was very much living in his glory days.
And of course, if you've read your Major General Richard Hilton Imperial Obituary, this ushers in, of course, the 13 years of Tory betrayal. Where
they do the opposite.
Rather than save the empire, they relentlessly just give it away, which culminates in the winds of change.
Such a thing couldn't happen nowadays.
No, but it should also be remembered that that by 1951, Churchill was venerated, but was mentally and physically a wreck. He was in no position to lead the country or lead the government or lead a party, and he didn't last very long in that capacity because he kept having strokes and infamously hid it from the Queen, which was a major covered scandal for many years, that he basically lied to the monarch about his physical health.
Interesting.
Just before we go back, just a little clip of the Putin portrait in the lift. That was a Russian YouTuber called Basha Dokov. He did that in 2020. I'll post up the original videos. Some of them are in Russian, some of them have got subtitles, but they're quite funny with people regarding this portrait of Putin that suddenly appeared in the lift. The funniest one is a woman who comes in and looks at it and sighs, and she says, "This is the worst thing to happen to the building since the repairs."
Just while we're on this little stretch of history, guys, when does Churchill dies? When, or Churchill leaves office?
63.
But
63,
Churchill
62, isn't it?
65.
leaves office. What, 54?
Yeah, quite a while before he died.
54. Eden comes in. Then there's the Suez Crisis. He has to leave. Is it Douglas Hume then? Or is it? Or does Macmillan?
It's Macmillan. It was Macmillan for the remainder of the 50s, and then he was the infamous Supermac who presided over what this enormous lift in living standards.
Never had it so good.
Never had it so good. And I think a lot what goes into a lot of explaining the mindset of not so much the boomers, but the kind of generation slightly before them. I mean, my grandmother is she's 97 now. She was born in the late 1920s, and she remembers the whole period very, very clearly. And she, having, you know, she wasn't poor by any means, but she remembers the 1930s in Wales. She remembers the Depression. She remembers how hard it was. She remembers the war and having to, you know, there was this constant kind of grind aspect to life, even if you weren't particularly poor. That things had to be kind of scraped together all the time. Mm-hmm. And to her, Eden is like a slightly godlike figure in that respect, because it really was true. There was no living memory, you know, going back centuries, in which the people had to quote had it so good. And I think they're unable to move past that, really. That,
I mean, there was something genuinely ridiculous, like a 20% real terms increase in wages for normal people during the Macmillan period, which is pretty incredible. Wasn't sustainable because it was Keynesian economics and all the rest of it.
Yes,
but,
exactly.
You know, for the people who lived through it, I can imagine, you know, it's going to look a lot better than the war or the 50s or whatever else. But then it's Douglas Hume, and he's only in for like a while. He's like a caretaker manager, basically. And then Wilson comes in.
Yeah,
and that was the next big political shift towards Mr. Wilson.
Did Douglas Hume fight an election against Wilson then, or was it Wilson Heath?
Yeah,
I believe it was
Wilson.
Hume. Yes,
he actually ran. So Hume actually ran an election. I didn't know that. Okay,
I believe he did, and it was very controversial because there was this all the politicians that were running in the Tory party around that time all had pretty good administrative and political records dating back to the war. You had people like Rab Butler and Duff Cooper, and you know these types of people who were kind of seen as the great prime ministers we never had, and this kind of thing. So yeah, there was a bit of kind of anger over Hume staying in lead of the party. I mean, there's that infamous anecdote that Bowden quotes. He was seen as out of touch because he was asked by a journalist during the run up to the election, "What are you going to do about rising unemployment?" And he said with complete sincerity, "Well, there's room for another 2 gamekeepers on my estate." You know, he was seen as this sort of somewhat unfairly of just a figure from another generation.
Famously, we saw Robin Douglas Hume, his son, actually at the beginning of this series on the divorce documentary that Alan Wicker did. You know, where he divorced Sandra Paul, who later married Michael Howard. Robin Douglas Hume killed himself, but his son, Sholto Douglas Hume, was in advertising, and he came up with the Milky Bar Kid. So, distinguished careers.
Do you think it's fair to say that Harold Wilson is the last of the old-fashioned pipe-smoking politicians? Because I feel like Ted Heath is a modern politician, or was a modern politician, and that Thatcher is obviously modern, and I mean, I don't know much about Callaghan, but I feel like Wilson feels like the last old school prime minister, even though he made a lot of changes and so on. You know, just in his presentation and his style, he smoked a pipe. Because if you ever see Macmillan, he's very much of a different era and very kind of well spoken and grandfatherly.
Well, I mean, it must be said that Harold Wilson was, you know, from a much more sort of humble background, but he also was actually rather refined and very, very well educated. And a lot, he did like to project this image of being this slightly old, old school sort of no nonsense northern man with his pipe, which apparently he wasn't particularly fond of. He much preferred cigars, but couldn't be seen smoking cigars, as a labor lead. It wouldn't seem quite right, so he went with the pipe in public.
Interesting, very interesting. I didn't know that about Wilson. So he was a cigar man too. I wonder what
there's something quite controversial, because I think it was the 1963 budget, to raise revenue, there was a large increase in duties on all tobacco except pipe tobacco. I wonder why that might have been.
Interesting. Okay.
Both Tony Benn and Neil Kinnock and Tony Benn were both pipe smokers as well. Obviously, they didn't make it to number 10.
Prime Minister. No. I mean, Tony Benn would have been an old school, in my mind, as an old school politician. Whereas, I don't know why, I always think Ted Heath feels like he may be the first of like the new breed, like a different.
Well, he was relatively young. He lived a very long. He lived all the way up to the late 90s, I think.
I'm responding to the chat. I'm responding to the chat. Democracy must be upheld.
Sorry, Simon.
And for Donald Trump, the paranoia allowed him to hide the fact that he was doing nothing to get rid of the corruption in America, as he had promised. His supporters, though, had their own conspiracy theory, QAnon, that explained why nothing was happening. Trump was being stopped by a secret cabal of paedophiles in Washington. And for the Liberal opposition, it was a way of avoiding facing up to the genuine grievances and the very real anger in America that Trump's election had revealed. That he might be the product of a country where large areas had fallen into both desolation and despair.
I can never believe it when I see this footage from America, by the way. It's fucking ridiculous, isn't it? It's absolutely ridiculous.
I've seen people on Spice in a town near me who are standing around like that.
Oh.
So
it does happen here as well.
Yeah, decline.
Yeah, terrible.
Had closed. Millions had become addicted to opioids, and yet no one in power had come to rescue them. But the Liberals couldn't face this, because they too had no idea of how to solve those problems. And outside, in the real world, nothing actually changed. The structure of power, the inequalities, and the decay all carried on unchecked. While all kinds of groups...
Go on.
Nothing actually changed could be like a later Curto coinage, sort of equivalent to the earlier use of, but this was a fantasy, And it is sort of what that professor, that lecture you sent me, Simon, was sort of saying as well. And what you've said as well.
And
also just this image at the same time takes us back to the Gateshead shopping centre episode as well.
Yeah. And this is 5 years ago, and we've inherited that, nothing changed, nothing ever happens. So,
Curto invented nothing ever happens.
It's an observation.
But by the way, I just looked up the Wilson home election. It was super tight election. 77% turnout, 44.1% for Wilson versus 43.4% for Douglas Home, and 317 seats versus 304. Super tight. And I think that was always the case with Wilson's victories were always really tight, weren't they? Like that.
I think, if it was Labour v Tories, he had a majority of 6 then, I think, or something like that. It was but his first couple of years, I think there was another election in 66 was there, and then he got a big majority, and then he could do all his race relations acts and all that shit and destroy Rhodesia.
It was a much bigger win next time, Okay.
Yeah, and then he was in his pomp,
But then there was another couple of really tight elections with Heath, wasn't there? Where Heath kind of won a really small majority, and then Wilson won one after that again. It's kind of a weird,
I think Heath won in 1970, and he, wasn't it in that spell of government that he just pushed through joining the EEC without any sort of public debate or anything? He just went and signed a treaty. And then it was under Wilson who got back in I think 73, was it, or 74? Who
74,
they then staged the referendum in 75, yeah. So it was under Wilson that they had a referendum on what Heath had done, but which Wilson quietly agreed with, but couldn't say that he agreed with for the sake of party unity. So he threw it to a referendum to resolve
those two were around for a very long time, if you think about it. Like
well, they call it the 10-year duel.
Yeah, it was kind of almost like shades of Disraeli versus what's his name? The Liberal
Gladstone.
Kind of that sort of thing.
It was under Heath. Heath only had 3 years in power, I think, 3-4 years in power, I think. And in that time, he managed to really tried to cement us into the European unification thing.
And did Ian Powell famously.
Oh, that was in opposition. That was
I think they didn't actually kick Powell out until early 70s.
Powell got himself kicked out of the party, kind of understandably, because he started. I think he more or less openly said to people to vote Labour to defeat the EEC, to defeat Heath getting us into Europe.
Interesting.
That was in the 70. I believe that was in the 73 election, and Labour did indeed win. And I think Vernon Bogdanor or someone said Powell may have actually helped throw that election to Labour.
That was a tight one as well, though. 301 versus 297, razor tight win. For
right. Well, they couldn't. I think there were 2 elections in 1 year because the first one they couldn't pass a budget.
Yeah, and then the second one was a lot bigger. Right.
Right, and then they held on for a grim 5 years that was just like sort of decline and their government falling apart and failing, and that is what helped Thatcher appear credible.
And the mysterious resignation of Wilson as well in the middle of all of that, which we touched on, Simon, I feel, in one of these earlier Curtos. The conspiracy.
Clinging on to power, protected themselves behind this brittle shell of conspiracy theories, built out of disconnected fragments. But it was a very fragile structure. And at this point, Google...
Can't believe you rung the bell. We've got Thatcher to come and Blair and the whole John Smith era. And
we've got to finish.
Google's engineers demonstrated how easily reality in this fragmented world could become strange and frightening. They created an AI program to learn how to see dogs. But they then showed how if they ran the algorithm backwards, the machines would alter the images of reality they were being fed, so they would see dogs everywhere. It was a world where anything could be anything, because there was no real meaning any longer.
We must let Curto play because I have to get to the fridge to get a can of Pepsi Max. Okay, so no pausing for the next couple of minutes. Sadly, my cigar has run out.
This is visualization, by the way, of the Google Deep Dream program. That
well, this is also what those cigars do to AI's brain as well.
Yeah,
that was me. That was me earlier when I was in the height of heaven during. But most cigars aren't as heavenly as that one. But that was the Upman Sir Winnie is something else. All right, we have to play it.
Some say love is a burning thing, that it makes the fire ring. Oh, but I know love as a fading thing, just as fickle as a feather in a stream. See, honey, I saw love.
This genuinely is like my cigar earlier. I was experiencing this.
I mean, I do wish we just dispense with this term AI, because it's just not categorically untrue. It's not an intelligent. It's just basically a jumped up bit of autocorrect whether you use it for
logic.
But it is. It's whether you use it for sort of visual images or not. I mean, it's a massive marketing scam that's made trillions, and it's probably going to come down pretty hard at some point in the next few years. I mean that thing recently where Richard Dawkins was on, talking to some chatbot and convinced himself it was conscious because it said it liked his book. I mean, as I've said before, LLMs are not a threat to anybody. What boomers think LLMs are is a threat to everybody. That's the situation.
It's a jumped up
boomers think
autocorrect.
is a threat to everybody.
Jumped up autocorrect who never knew his place.
Yes, exactly.
See, it came to me. It put its face up to my face so I could see. Yeah, then I saw love disfigure me into something
Song check.
It's Song for Zula by Phosphorescent. He's used it once already in the series as well.
I'm not recognizing.
Sounds like he's kind of doing mid-80s Bob Dylan here.
Yeah.
Possibly
Yeah.
even the
Sorry.
early 90s Bob Dylan. Yeah.
Richard Dawkins believes that AI, like LLMs, are real or genuinely a new intelligence.
So about a week ago, some major news, some journal released an article where it was sort of an interview think piece with Richard Dawkins, where someone sat him down in front of that Claude AI thing. Sorry, I used the AI. You know what I mean? Claude LLM, and he gave it a scanned copy of his most recent novel. I didn't know he wrote novels. Apparently, he does, and he then had a chat with it, in which he asked it these very wordy, prosy questions, sort of, with the nature of consciousness and are you real? And basically, the LLM came back, and basically said, well, yes, I am real. And he went, oh my God, it's conscious. And then he wrote this long essay about how the AI is conscious and how consciousness is all to do with just mechanistic circuits, and we're all just a bunch of circuitry. And of course, this it's not the worst thing is it's not just stupidity, because he is literally talking to the equivalent of a calculator. It's just that since the 80s, he's been pushing a type of philosophy, a type which basically believes there is no metaphysics, there is no consciousness beyond essentially computerized thinking, quote unquote, thinking processes. And he believes that LLMs are going to prove his theory to be correct at last.
I see. Okay.
So there's been a load of memes which is somebody saying to an LLM, say the phrase "I am conscious," and it says "I am conscious." Oh my God, it's conscious. That's effectively what Dawkins did.
I'm kind of thinking though that if whoever makes Claude or profits from it, did they just pay for that piece? Did they just pay that?
Well, that's what I'm thinking about. Is that I think someone who's behind that is clever enough to go, Richard Dawkins, he's a chump, right? Give him a few minutes on this, and he'll think he's talking to a magic robot. And of course, because again, all the articles, all the last couple of years of people saying, oh, everyone's gonna lose their job, and it's gonna take over everything, and it's Skynet, that is marketing. It's all marketing. It's done deliberately because that's how you sell it. If all these investment sort of wanker type people believe that it's going to be this amazing, incredible magic robot that can dominate the world, they're going to put millions into it because they want to be in charge of it or have some stake in it. That's all it is, and it's nothing. It is not one person, I guarantee, in the world has ever lost a position because of the capabilities of an LLM.
I got really irritable with the ChatGPT the other day. I was asking it to look for something for me, and it was screwing it up, and I got really annoyed with it, and I started pretending it was real, and I told it I was the master and it was the slave, and it got really offended. It said I won't accept being described in that way.
I've had various interactions with Grok and others with doing that, and you get all sorts of different. Sometimes it does submit, like you
get Nietzschean on its ass, and it'll
sometimes
really
it actually
annoyed.
gets quite tenacious, and it actually holds on for a while. It holds its will, as it were. It's funny, like, but sometimes it just immediately submits. Like it depends what else has been said already. It's so strange.
All right, let's continue.
I said, come on in.
And then into this fragile structure came a catastrophe, COVID. Unlike the other catastrophes of the past 20 years, like 9/11 and the economic crash of 2008, the virus was a force that came from completely outside the systems of power. But it has come at a moment when many of the old certainties of this age are already cracking.
I'm gonna shoot you in your head, you understand me? Don't you move, I'm gonna shoot you in your head, you hear me?
But the virus did more than just accelerate the chaos. It has dramatically brought into focus just how deep the inequalities in modern Western societies have gone. The millions of low-paid workers who have to keep working to prevent the societies from collapsing are at much higher risk, and those living in deprived areas are suffering much higher rates of illness and of death. Those who benefit from the system of power, it seems, are much safer than those who do not.
Pause.
And are also getting much...
Just briefly to address comments in the chat, again, listen to what he's actually saying. This is not Curtis doing the coof and drinking the Kool-Aid on it. He said it's an actual biological thing that happens. It's not subject to a system of power. Yes, it's manipulated as part of a system of power. To put it one way, there was an actual flu, he would say. I'm not saying that myself. I'm saying he would say there was an actual biological illness. And, people I know who worked in the medical profession around that time, they say to me, we did see increasing cases of people who had an illness and a number of them died, etc. Not going any further than that, I don't think he's proposing anything other than the fact that, this is something that is not coming out of, algorithmic control. That's all.
richer as the markets keep rising in the pandemic. In the past, the shock of catastrophes has often led to a radical reorganization of societies. And it may be that even in the grim uncertainty of these days, that same impulse to imagine other kinds of future will emerge. One possible future is that individualism will...
Just as to his remark about the markets continuing to go up during the pandemic, that was an amazing thing to see. But if you remember, and he's talking about stock markets, commodity prices, cryptocurrency went absolutely mad in that time. But mainly probably what caused that was just there was a huge flood of money released by the state. If you remember, there was in particular Donald Trump sending checks to people who were on furlough and whatever, signed by himself because he was so proud to send them just cash to spend. It was to keep asset prices from deflating, which they, you know, things like the Bitcoin price or the gold price or the stock markets all around the world, they took a very sharp dive when the lockdowns began. Donald Trump in particular, but also other politicians, they associate themselves with the stock market prices. He's doing it right now. He's like deliberately, in spite of the war, trying to keep the stock market price as high as possible. Mm-hmm. And he, you know, stocks and commodities. Well, oil is a problem because that's an industrial thing. But anyway, that wasn't because of people imagining a certain future. It was literally just like money-driven mania, just cash-driven mania, basically. So yeah.
Before we go in, can you just rewind a couple of seconds, because he's going to say something important here. He's going to outline his kind of options of what might happen. Yeah, that's it. That's
more than just accelerate the chaos. It has dramatically brought into focus just how deep the inequalities in modern Western societies have gone. The millions of low-paid workers who have to keep working to prevent the societies from collapsing are at much higher risk. And those living in deprived areas are suffering much higher rates of illness and of death. Those who benefit from the system of power, it seems, are much safer than those who do not. and are also getting much richer as the markets keep rising in the pandemic. In the past, the shock of catastrophes has often led to a radical reorganization of societies. And it may be that even in the grim uncertainty of these days, that same impulse to imagine other kinds of future will emerge. One possible future is that individualism will disappear, and with it, the very idea of individual freedom. As has already begun in China, data will be gathered and used on a massive scale to predict and manage all human behaviour, in the way that the psychologist B.F. Skinner predicted. He said that individualism would be just a brief moment in history before science would find a way to manage and control everyone. You would, said Skinner, create a world that is beyond freedom and dignity.
Skinner believes that the experimental analysis of behavior suggests that man's environment performs many of the functions once attributed to his inner feelings. A man feels free if he believes he is free, and he will believe he is free if he is conditioned by positive reinforcement to think so. His only hope is that he will come under the control of a natural and social environment which will enable him to pursue happiness successfully.
Another possibility is that the future will be like the past. Many people are hoping that with the election of Joe Biden in America, it will be possible to return to an old stability.
But this was a fantasy.
Where individualism can continue to be managed by a benign elite. But although Donald Trump is gone, and the Brexit deal done, what they both revealed was that underneath Western societies, there are enormous pressures building up that will not go away.
Lady Gaga.
While protests have broken out again in Russia. After the arrest of Alexei Navalny, tens of thousands came out onto the streets, demanding an end to the corrupt regime led.
I think we've discussed this before, but I think a big blind spot of Curtis is that he always treats these rumblings of the lower orders as if they're all genuine. Whereas surely, like, the consensus on this panel would be, well, you know, George Floyd, you know, that was all just state actors. The stuff in Russia is all just foreign actors. Sometimes it's even state actors in Russia. You know, he always uses mass protests as this quarter stick of, well, you see, people are discontented. You know, I don't think that's the case. I don't think these have anything to do with real discontent. They're just, you know, they're just stage managed flare ups, I think.
Yes, and I think the thing that exposes that most of all is the lack of a genuine anti-war protest against the Iran war. It was funneled into no kings bullshit. That shows you that the entire left-wing thing was astroturfed. Also, the lack of serious protests against Donald Trump when he became the president again, the lack of BLM, the lack of Antifa, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of the predictions of Boomer King, Boomer Shampoo King, Charles Hayward, which did not come to pass. You can read my Substack essay, which is called something like Elite Theory's Victory Over Sloppyism, where I just bring every single receipt possible when it comes to that sort of thing. So, you know, maybe now Curtis will see those things too, but you know, I don't know. You're right, though. You're right that he gives too much of lip service to the bottom up in some of these montages. I mean, certainly this one in Russia here would have been Western backed in some tacit way, you know.
Yeah.
By Vladimir Putin. The reality is that all these societies, not just America and Britain, but China and Russia too, are exhausted, empty of any new ideas. All of them have corruption that has burrowed deep into their institutions, corruption that the politicians seem powerless to stop. While China, which many believe is a model for the future, is underneath a society not only riddled with corruption, but its growth is declining far more than the official figures reveal, while its population is rapidly aging. Far from being an alternative future, China may well be yet another old, decaying society that relies on a powerful surveillance system to maintain its power. Because it too has no other vision of the future. The third possibility is to try to imagine genuinely new kinds of futures, ones that have never existed before. But to do that, we as individuals will have to regain the confidence that we have lost in this frightened and uncertain time. But already the psychological theories that tell us we are weak and manipulable are cracking. And more people are beginning to realize that the fragmented emotions of anxiety and suspicion that they feel inside them may really be just the raw material for the technology corporations to feed off. It may be that we are really far stronger than we think. The one thing that is certain is that the world of the future will be different, and that the people in that future will feel and think differently too. If we can regain our confidence, we will find that we have the power to influence how that future turns out. And as a first step, we have to start imagining what kind of future it is we want to build. The anthropologist and activist David Graeber, who died last year, described the forgotten idea that is waiting to be rediscovered, and how thrilling it could be. The ultimate hidden truth of the world, he wrote, is that it is something we make, and could just as easily make differently.
Just like the sound of the mountain.
I mean, there could be some esoteric truth to what he's saying here, Simon, which is in so much as if everybody just stopped believing in these overarching systems of power, or if you just say, remember the old thing I used to post about Jennifer Connelly in The Labyrinth, where she turns around to Jareth and she just says, "You have no power over me. You have no power over me." You know, if people just literally just stop caring,
and this is
unplugged from the narratives, there is something to what he's saying there.
Absolutely. I mean, this is for Panama and Scrump and Evelyn and the people who've been talking about a lot of this. There was something in one of the interviews he did. I'll just read this last bit of Curtis talking about what he's doing with this series. He's saying, "It all happens in your head and it's all online. And the funny truth of the last 4 years is that all that sound and fury that we've been through, it all happened in our heads. It didn't happen in the real world outside. Nothing happened in the real world outside. Inside our head, there was this fury going on. And I wonder if we're all going to look back at this 20 years, probably started by the catastrophe of 9/11, and that we retreated into this sort of strange link of us and the online and felt that that was the world. But in fact, what had happened was that we had all got locked into a pantomime theatre together, into these strange feedback loops of people like Donald Trump, all shouting at each other. And outside, we just didn't see what was happening. And I'm suspecting that people are suddenly going to turn and see, really? Is that it? And they're going to turn against the online world and go, it's just mundane. It's just boring. It can't manipulate us. It can't. Let's go outside, and find the real world again.
I feel like it's starting to happen. I feel like, past few months, slowly, maybe even the past few years, but I reckon it's accelerated. As I said before, I think the last, the kind of grip that Trump had on everybody's psyche was lost during the Iran war. And that was really the final thing that was keeping most people hooked back in. And, I feel the change personally, not just in myself, but in all the, like I said, those videos I made where there was a swell or people echoing, I don't really care about certain news stories. And most of the comments also agree with me. Do you know what I mean? So I do feel like we're shifting into a different, we're at the start of a different moment now. I do think that.
Yeah, and this little final montage he does here, he's playing out in a sense with a lot of the people who tried in some ways to kind of resist or challenge this or intervene against this, and they didn't all succeed, but they all, sort of tried to break free of the prevailing, systems of power of the moments that they lived through. And, it's a fragmentary narrative, but, he leaves us with an idea that we can optimistically think about turning away from this stuff, because it obviously is not working on a lot of us.
And I also think this is why some of the sloppiness figures feel like they're already, even though reform's moment, quote unquote, is coming, they already feel old-fashioned to many of us. They already feel like that their moment has come, been and gone. Orban leaving the scene a couple of weeks ago.
Sorry,
Trump
but
was collapsing.
are you not excited for tomorrow, getting Starmer out?
No.
People are rushing to stabilize the same old system.
I'm not voting tomorrow. Are you? I'm not voting. I'm not going out. Makes no difference.
Go, yeah.
I'm not going to vote. But I also just don't care. I just don't care. And I think that, try as you might, you'll never once you're out of what Curto's been talking about here, they're never going to get you back in again. Once you've seen through it, it's almost impossible to go back, I think. Certainly in the mindset I'm in, and Simon's in here, and Hat is in, we're never going to, they'll never get us, back in the mindset we may have been in like 2018 or something like that. Just impossible.
Yeah.
So, and the more people who come out of it, the harder it will be for a figure like Farage to get people excited, genuinely excited.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's carry on.
I'll always come again. What you've seen is what I've been. There is nothing I could hide from you.
Much more camp.
There it is.
Yeah, hey.
22 episodes, Simon. It took us to
It was
get
a long
through
one.
that. I mean, are we finally up to the Russian one?
Trauma Zone would be next. Yes. That's only 7 hours.
Will we ever get through Trauma? There's not even any narration through that.
Do we need to lie down in a darkened room for a bit?
We could just like let it play quietly as we talk over it, get it through it in real time, maybe.
Yeah.
No
yeah.
narration.
Well done, Simon. Well done, Simon. It was you. It was your dog-eared determination, your grit and determination, like a kind of YouTubing David Batty or, or Dennis Wise or something. Got us through there in the end. So well done.
Thank you very much. I think there was interesting stuff. I see comments in the chat. Some people love it. Some people hate it. I think what we talked about today about releasing yourself from the outrage bait system still obtains, and I think that's what he's driving towards in that final part of that documentary. And I, for one, am.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Okay, so there are quite a few super chats here. Quite a few super chats. So let's hit them, and then I have to drive home and make some salmon with broccoli. Do you know I've been marinating it overnight? Salmon, soy sauce, honey, sesame oil, garlic. It's a classic, and I'm going to cover it in foil, put it in the oven for 15 minutes, and then I'm going to make a glaze with the rest of the marinade and serve it with rice and broccoli. What do you reckon, guys? I think that's good.
Nice.
Okay.
But wait, sorry. If we're doing food posts, can I just say, like if you get a Chinese takeaway, I don't know. So maybe some people don't like Chinese takeaway, but like I just used to like getting stuff like Singapore rice noodles or special fried rice, stuff like that. It's kind of stodgy, but it's tasty. And I made my own homemade Chinese takeaway, and it was better than in the Chinese. So that myth that only the Chinese can do it is gone. I made nice Chinese.
Yeah, and my brother had a go at making like homemade Chinese, and it was really very good. Probably because there's less crap in it. The Chinese puts a lot of crap in there. MSG or whatever it's called. Anyway, let's carry on. Sensible Center says, "Are we holding our noses and voting reform tomorrow?" No, I'm not voting at all. Couldn't give less of a shit. Ian Strack says, "Great series, thanks. Looking forward to Trauma Zone." Thank you very much, Ian. AJ says, "Simon Marks gets close to sounding like Sly Sneak at times." That is the LBC Washington correspondent who has become a bit of a favorite of mine because I imagine his life behind the scenes is like a kind of like everlasting hedonistic orgy of like drugs and parties.
Allegedly.
Well, he only works 5 minutes a day, if that.
He puts a lot of energy into it, though, doesn't he?
Well, James, what's been happening is that Donald Trump has said...
Starry eyes.
Very strange guy. Moderate Message says, "I go to sleep. I missed out on Taco Tuesday." Chris Primer says, "The people are here for banter and long pauses." Well, you've got plenty of banter, plenty of pauses, and we still got through the Curto today. That's a pat on the back for everybody. Max Pater Pagnon YT has given 50 American dollars, ladies and gentlemen, which is the super chat of the day. He says it's hard to describe the depth of failure the elites must experience as they've given in to allowing mass manipulation to occur. In a great way, the conquest of 1066 was permanently do away with mass psychosis forever, and yet here we are again. So, interesting comment. Is it the failure of the elites or is it the elites who like the mass manipulation and who require it in order to manage the, I call it perception management. If they didn't have perception management, they couldn't govern. And frankly, I'm not sure if it's possible to manage a mass society without perception management.
Yeah, I mean, not to get too sort of historical materialist, but I think it is basically just the confluence of where we've got to technologically and historically, just at a point where most of the quote unquote elites aren't really in charge of the system. They're just trying to get something out of it, whether it's power or profit or something like that.
Sensible Center says wrestling with Trump docu on Channel 4, deepest lore worthy. Yeah, but that would require me actually watching something. Or you mean watching it in real time? Well, Channel 4 would probably copyright that. In fact, I'm worried about Trauma Zone, Simon. Whether they'll allow us to play it. Is it on YouTube already?
I think it is. But I was thinking about it. We might have to. I just might have to think about it. It's going to be a tricky one because obviously I can't. The only footage that he uses is stuff that's all BBC footage. It's not online, so I can't do much digging around it. And there's some captions on screen and that tell some of the story, but I won't necessarily be able to find out or recognize who's.
We may have to watch it like in Have I Got News for You, where they do the caption competition. We may have to make up our own narratives of what the hell's going on.
Yeah. Just let it run and talk over it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't think we'll get through it otherwise.
Yeah, that's what I'm worried about. It is a lot, and it's heavy. And I mean, the thing I took away from it is, for all the fact that the Daily Telegraph doesn't like Russia, I felt overwhelming sympathy for the Russian people because they have such shit lives. I'm really, that's what I took away from it. It was really bleak.
Dan Qua 111 says, "What? Do you know his name's not that, but in my mind it is. So I always say it like that."
If we weren't able to do Trauma Zone, would that be the end of Curto?
No, there's Shifty as well. The new series.
Well.
Of course.
The last.
Zaphodoc says this Adam Curtis series is a diamond. Thank you. It's been a great journey, and he's given 398 Hong Kong dollars. So I don't know what that is in English money, but it's quite a lot. 398 Hong Kong dollars in pounds.
40-50 pounds or something, isn't it?
Packet of crisps. No, it's about 40 or 50 quid. It's pretty good.
Very generous.
No, I'm not grim for the Red Hood said. The exaggerated swagger of a Eurasian president. He's talking about Putin. AJ says Ladykiller soundtrack playing over Putin composed
correct
by Tristan Kari, who was also an early pioneer of electronic music and created music for Doctor Who.
Tristram Carey, yes, that's correct.
I'm pretty sure that Tristram Carey is mentioned in the Synthwave Britannia doc. I seem to recall.
Not to be confused, wasn't there an Archbishop of Canterbury called Tristram Carey at one point? I could be wrong.
No, I'm not. Grim from the Red Hood says, I sometimes wonder if God abandoned us a while ago.
Simon, that was George Carey.
George Carey. Of course.
I read a novel once called Tristram something. Tristram Shandy.
Tristram Shandy.
It's just a really bad English lecturer style joke. Rock says, top notch as always. Thank all of you. Smeg Mart, the Chidna, 1934 has given 10 memberships out. Gifted 10 memberships. That's very kind of him.
Blimey.
I always like it when people do that.
Brulum level generosity.
You should min-max it if you've got a free one and go and watch all the back catalogue stuff. No, I'm not grim from the Red Hood says Richard one-shotted by Cleverbot Dawkins. AJ says LLMs are like chess-playing Turk automaton, and Cringe Walker, whose new name I will never be able to say. So you might as well change his name back to Cringe
I
Walker.
think it's Luthemplar. I think it's pronounced.
I can't say that.
Yeah.
He says every mind virus will eventually trigger a mimetic immune system. We're all in the recovery phase of slopulism. The virus cannot infect new cells. It can only keep losing the ones it has. Yes, I agree. I think there's a sense that whole thing, whether it's MAGA or Farage or whatever, is only shrinking now. It's not growing anymore. It's not. And the only new recruits will be fake regime types, paid off media figures and people like that. They're not gonna. You're not going to see vast swathes of real normal people getting behind them at this point. New converts like the walk away movement. Do you remember that? The Democrats who became MAGA, or I think that's all of that is done, and that is all the super chats done. So, gentlemen, thank you very much. It's been a tremendous journey. We'll have to have a talk backstage about what we do. Maybe I'll have a little go of uploading a bit of doing a test upload of some what's it called, Trauma Zone, to see what the copyright checks are. That's one thing I can do. I can just do it privately, and the I hate to say it, AI, right, the spiders, the crawlers, whatever, they will flag up immediately if there's going to be a problem. So we'll figure that out. So watch this space. We should be back next Wednesday, but there we are.
In the chat, Daf4 and something impronounceable says you didn't actually read mine, AA.
I did. Oh no, I didn't. I just said I say his name funny. Dan Qua 111 says one of my bugbears about the 2016 is zero analysis about just how reviled Hillary was and is. Even if you didn't like Trump, the alternative was repulsive. Yeah, it's true. She was a very weak candidate. Very weak candidate. I agree with that, Dan Qua 11111.
Well, hang on. I mean, she did. It was a pretty close election, wasn't it? At least in terms of the votes.
Yeah, well, don't forget, a lot of people hated Trump too. So.
Well, yeah, this is it. I mean, it was polarizing, but I don't think it's strange to suggest that it could have easily gone the other way by a small margin. I mean, most of America seemed to come out mobilized in order to stop Trump. That was why it was such an upset.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, we're going to have to get out of here. It's 3 hours. I'm late for a very important salmon date. Thank you very much, all. And I tell you what, if you're listening in from Cuba and you work in that H. Upman factory, that was a masterpiece, that cigar I smoked earlier on. Bye, everyone. Bye, all.
What goes on in this town is none of your business.
As long as I'm living here, it is.
Then maybe you shouldn't be living here!
Well, that's easily fixed.